This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Welcome to Spotcast, Season 4, Episode 37. My name is Timothy. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario. Mississauga, Mr. and Mississauga, Ontario.
Hello.
And we're also joined by Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
Didn't mess that one up. Oh, yes, I did.
No, I thought somebody was going to say, like, Mr. Saga, that's my dad, you know?
Mr.
You don't have to call me Mr. Saga.
Yeah, exactly. Only they call my dad Mr. Saga. All right. Anywho. All right, so digging in, we got some fact check. A bit of a spoiler for today's show, but we were talking about last week about the character who plays, or the woman who plays Renee Picard, and it's Penelope Mitchell is the correct name of that person. And I had mentioned Everything Everywhere All at Once. Apparently people I know have seen it. I don't know how. But, because apparently, I don't know, maybe it's in the US, but in Canada, it's only in theaters April 1st. And across, like in select theaters in April 1st, and then across Canada, April 6th, which means, so like, you know, tomorrow, as we record today, on the 31st of March, coming out in Canada in some places and whatever. So maybe it's been playing in the States already, or something like that, or was it Sundance or something, or does anybody know? Nobody knows. Nobody cares.
I saw your fact check and assumed that was correct. I have seen a couple articles as I've been going through entertainment news this week that have been highlighting it as it's, you know, coming, but I haven't seen anything else.
So do you know who's in it? Michelle Yeoh, but this guy was on, I want to say Jimmy Fallon last night. Not Fallon, like Jimmy Kimmel last night. The guy who played the kid in the second Indiana Jones movie is now an adult.
Oh, yeah, Ke Kwan?
Yeah.
The guy from the Goonies.
And the Goonies, yes. He's one of the stars of this thing. So he was talking about his whole, you know, how he got into the Goonies and how he got into Indiana Jones. And it was supposed to be his brother who was auditioning. And he was coaching him from behind the camera. And they sort of said, you know, let's get that kid back in here. Next thing he knows, he's flying off to Asia to shoot, right? Anyway, yeah, so, well, I think we kind of knew this, but directing the last couple of episodes of this episode that we just watched, and the last week's episode was none other than Howard the Duck's Leah Thompson.
This episode is in the one we just watched?
Yes, we just watched this.
That was not by Leah Thompson. She did the two previous ones. This one was Jonathan Frakes.
Anyway, yeah. So
she was in this episode. We'll get to that.
She was in this episode, yes. But I was trying to say, like, I don't know why I called it Howard the Duck. I really don't give a hoot. But, you know, I just thought I would
it's I don't give a quack.
All right, fine. Yes. Anyway, so she was on the. Well, we'll talk about it later. Yeah. So there we go. And yeah, sad news. Taylor Hawkins died at 50 years old. Drummer from the Foo Fighters. Really sad. We had tickets to see them play, and of course that's all canceled. And yeah, so a really great drummer, great guy, funny guy, but yeah, tragic loss for rock and roll.
Yeah, that was a real stunner. You know, to have somebody who's so vibrant and so young go was really, I think, caught a lot of us by surprise. And yeah, I mean, the Foo Fighters have just been part of pop culture and everything for, I mean, since the mid-90s, right? Like
they were doing their 25th anniversary tour because it was actually the 26th anniversary because they had to put everything on hold because of COVID as well, right? So
yeah.
On the sad news. Anyway,
yeah,
there you go. No, that's sad news. And you know, sucks for Dave Grohl because like it seemed like Taylor was his. You know, they were always the two guys, you know, fronting the band and on talk shows and stuff like that, right? So
yeah, I mean, he was probably the best known member of the Foo Fighters outside of Dave. Yeah, I mean, yeah. And I mean, when we saw them last, you know, you and I and Xavier went to see them last. He was, you know, as much the star of the show. He got out there and was the front man for some stuff, and Dave sat in on the drums, and he really was very big presence. It's still taking a little while to process that he's gone, especially at such an age. I mean, geez, what a shock.
Mm-hmm. And it's always a shock when somebody, like, just out of the blue, like, you just, so-and-so died. Like, well, you know, like the singer from NXS, and he just suddenly,
he's just gone.
One day.
Yeah.
and that the Cook guy, a couple of years ago, Anthony Bourdain.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and in those cases, obviously, there was suicide, mental health issues, and those are always really surprising because they seem like people who sort of have it all. In this case, they're still. I haven't seen anything about a cause of death so far.
And other problem was he was in down south or something like.
Well, they were in Colombia, they were in down South America.
All right, and so Apple beat out Netflix for the first streaming movie Oscar.
No, Best Picture.
Best Picture. Sorry, Best Picture. Well,
because I was like confused. I was like, no, there's no way. I thought Roma got it. I was like, oh, they got Best Director, but not Best Picture.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. But Best Picture is sort of the moniker of the Oscars. That and Best Director, right? So
yeah, and they're quite often one and the same. Although I guess the last few years have sort of broken it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's like they're trying to spread things out so that they get multiple nods, but I don't understand how you get a Best Picture without a Best Director. It's like saying, this was an amazing achievement. Too bad nobody did anything for it.
Yeah.
I also think it's true. Some of these, they do it because, they're like, well, look, this is the Best Picture, but we don't want to give it to the director, right? Like, what we should be saying is Academy Award-winning director Benjamin Affleck. But instead they said, all right, well, the movie was the best, but you weren't the best director. It's like, really? Are you sure about that?
Yeah, it's nonsensical in its way. But I mean, and the thing is, in so many of these circumstances, it's a like a lifetime achievement thing. Like Jane Campion, I have not seen the movie, but, a lot of people were saying Power of the Dog was, not Jane Campion's best film, but that she's done so many great films that it was sort of her turn to get an Oscar, which is such a strange way to view these things, but apparently that's how some of these things work in the voting for these awards. So,
well, it's like we said last week, there were 10 movies that were like the top grossing movies, and yet all of the movies that were voted for Best Picture were none of those movies.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like, what is the criteria? Like, I'm sorry, if you're producing a movie and you get like lots of bank from it, I'm pretty sure you're going to be pumped about that. Getting an Oscar does help with movie sales and stuff like that, but like doesn't help with the initial box office, right? So I mean, it does sort of create a long tail, sales opportunity for you if you get an Oscar, or any Oscar really, because then you get to advertise that.
But that's why they upped the category to 10 nominees and everything else. One is to appease people who are ticked off that The Dark Knight didn't get nominated when it was clearly one of the best pictures of that year. And two was to it's just something you can slap on a DVD package or on an advertising campaign to say it was Oscar nominated, or this many people were nominated for it, or it was nominated for 12 Oscars. That's the campaign, right? Like Dune won the most Oscars at the Oscars the other night. It was nominated for the most, and it won the most. I think it won 7, but none of them were in the glamour categories. It's not Best Picture, it's not Best Director, it's not Best Actor, Actress, Supporting Actor, Supporting Actress. So it sort of feels down tier, but they can say winner of 7 Academy Awards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and coming back to your earlier point, it's kind of like saying, this painting is great, but this painter is not the best painter,
Well, is owning a Picasso the same as owning like one of his seminal works? You know what I mean? Like,
you can't afford his seminal works. Like, that's the thing, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, but you're right. I mean, can you vote for Van Gogh as the best? Like, I mean, I suppose, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but Picasso is probably the best painter of the 20th century. But like, I don't know that necessarily one of his particular individual paintings is like the best painting of the 20th century. Or even of that year, as it were. Right? And that's kind of sort of, I don't know, it's kind of tough, like you said, like it's the artist and the art, right? Which we're going to get into in a minute, I think.
Yep.
Hopefully not. But
the problem with this is that it's also, it's the inherent problem with awarding art. Balancing them against each other. How arrogant are we to say that one film is better than another film, that one person is more worthy, their performance is more worthy? It really is a bit of a house of cards. When you start messing around with it, it just collapses pretty fast. You're like, what kind of nonsense is it to judge these people against one another? It's just kind of crazy.
Well, yeah, that's true. And I mean, and if you think about it, like movies as an art form, they're so diverse. I mean, like we all tend to like, because of our, because we're on a sci-fi podcast, we tend to like, things with sci-fi in them. But that's not to say that I can't watch Power of the Dog and like it. Like I was going to say about Coda in particular, my review of Coda was, I'm not crying, you're crying.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you know what I mean? I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a tearjerker, right? In a lot of ways, right? But it's just, it's a coming of age teenage story. I mean, like I talked about one a couple of weeks ago called Beans, which is the same plot, but completely different execution, right? So, and you almost learn how to sign watching this movie. It's so funny, right? So I don't know have you guys seen the movie at all, or you plan to see it?
I don't have Apple TV Plus, so I haven't seen it. But that's a me problem. The thing I do like about this, that avoids some of the like literally nobody saw this movie problem that sometimes the Best Picture award has, is that that's not true, I think, because it's on something like an Apple TV Plus, right? It's a lot more accessible. Even if people didn't see it sort of organically when it started getting Oscar buzz, pretty sure a lot of people watched it when it, won the Best Picture. I'm pretty sure many more people decided to watch it. So I think that is pretty nice to have the accessibility versus, here was some weird art house film that was only at Sundance or something, right? So,
well, I mean, that's an interesting point too, because the thing about it is like in order for it to get votes, it gets voted by the Academy, which is like an insider club. It's not like you and I get to vote like the Nintendo Awards, whatever they are, the People's Choice, right? They have to make, however it's possible, they have to make this movie available to all the people in the Academy. So whether they gave them a streamer or gave them a special access, I mean, that doesn't mean that everybody in the Academy would necessarily have to have Apple TV, but if it's only like, you know what I mean? Like,
no, they have a secure site. That's how they used to send out screeners. Now they just have a secure site where basically, and if you're a member of the Academy, they just put stuff onto the secure site.
So that's what I'm saying. Like Apple would have made it accessible to them, and it's and TCM is going to show it. Like TCM does an Oscar run every year, where they replay. That's why I watched The Sting a couple of weeks ago. I think I talked about, right? Because it was during the Oscar run, right? And so in 5-10 years or whatever, Coda is going to be on TM or TCM, like Turner's going to make it happen somehow, right?
Maybe.
Or I wonder if these movies will ever end up on a Blu-ray or something like that. Wouldn't that be interesting?
The other thing worth mentioning about Coda is that Troy Kotsur won for Best Supporting Actor, and he was the first deaf male to win that award. But it was also interesting because he apparently was very actively involved with the Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, the sign language that the Tuscans use. He actually developed that and was in costume as a Tuscan in the show. I didn't know that till this week. It was a couple of the blogs that I go to were like, big win for sci-fi. I was like, wait, what? But apparently Troy was very, very instrumental in developing that sort of non ASL sign language that the Tuscans used.
Oh yeah, quick sort of sidebar, and I probably should have caught this in the fact check. But what was the name of the actor who played the punk on last week's show?
Kirk Thatcher.
Kirk Thatcher. So Kirk Thatcher is a Muppeteer.
Yeah, and
he's directed a number of movies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw that. Apparently he was actually an associate producer on Star Trek VI. He's been behind the camera, like behind the scenes, doing movies for 35 years. And I didn't realize how they just pulled him in for that role as this kind of a joke and an inside kind of thing in the 80s, and they pulled him back out for this bit as well. Yeah. But apparently he's quite involved in the industry.
Yeah, he wasn't so much a nobody. So just here's you guys haven't seen Coda, right? So I'll tell you that. So we analyze things on this show. We kind of we scratch our heads and wonder why things are the way they are, and I can see why, in retrospect. But I kept thinking, she sings, right, and of course her parents cannot hear a single word, right? Mm-hmm. And so they go to her high school performance, and they're sitting in the audience, and they're looking around at the audience people, and they're talking about did you close the dog? Did you let the dog out? And did you buy butter? And to each other while they're sitting in their seats using sign language while these kids are on stage singing, right? So that's sort of a funny moment, right? but they kept looking around to see the audience's reaction to sort of gauge how well she was singing. Because they thought she's going to get up there and like make a fool of herself and whatever, and they'll just be here like as parents do to support them, right? But, you know, she was obviously a very good singer. The actress is a very good singer. And so she was, you know, in the story, she blows them away. But I kept thinking about this, like, you know, she's singing, she knows her parents in the audience, she signs to them all day long, right, at work, like she helps them fish on their boats and stuff like that. And when she's doing her big audition to go off to school, you know, the parents sneak into the auditorium, and it's not until then that she realizes that they're there that she starts signing the song she's singing, right? But you know what I mean? Like things that bug you in the plot. I kept looking at her going like, why is like this person can have a conversation with you and sign like on the fly, like she's that talented as a signer, right? Why is she not doing this? And then it's not until the very end, and, you know, spoilers, that she starts doing the, you know, signing as she's singing, right? So
yeah, I would imagine that it could be challenging though to if you're really focused on your performance to do both, right? I guess that's you're supposed to infer that she doesn't do that because it's harder to focus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's true. I mean, but having played music myself, I know you can walk and chew gum at the same time. If you've played something or sung something enough times, you can, you know, run around and act like an idiot while you're doing it, right? So I think having personal experience at that.
Hey, speaking of acting like an idiot.
Yeah, speaking of that, Jaime, what were you thinking? I'm sorry. So I don't know about you, but so of course, you know, I went to see a movie called The Batman while this was on. So I PVR'd this moment. So I didn't watch it live, I didn't watch it live. I was watching it on PVR, and so I'm fast forwarding through the commercials and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, I don't know why, I just picked up my phone and started looking at Twitter, and I saw here's what happened on Japanese TV that got bleeped, because I hadn't got to that part of the show yet, right? It was like coming up to it. And of course, you know, on Japanese TV, because the commentators are speaking in Japanese, they don't know what Will Smith is saying, right? So I don't know, maybe you were under a rock last week, but you know, the moment was that Chris Rock came out on stage to introduce and doing, you know, the kind of thing that Ricky Gervais started and Tina Fey and Amy Poehler have done as well, you know, making fun of the stars in the audience, you know, as a sort of point of humor, makes a comment about Jada Pinkett Smith, which seems to go over well, like it's just sort of a funny ha ha ha.
Well, it was kind of an awkward ha ha ha, but still.
Yeah, but and it's, you know, I don't know what happened, because like the way, I don't know, maybe it was the way it was cut or whatever, but yeah, and all of a sudden, you know, you see Will Smith walking up onto the stage and smacks Chris Rock across the face, right? And then sits in his chair and starts swearing at him about, you know, not mentioning, you know, Jada Pinkett Smith's name, right? So anyway, so that, you know, that's kind of what happened. It's an odd thing, and we're going to talk about this, separating the artist from the art, because, you know, I think we're all fans of Will Smith and some of his movies, and there's been some jokes on late night TV at his expense as a result of this. But the you know, the fallout is that, yeah, I mean, on live TV, he acted completely inappropriately.
Yeah.
You know, like to the point where, like, you know, he could have been charged. He could have been barred from the Academy. He could have, like, he was asked to leave.
He still could be barred from the Academy as a result.
That's true. This is kind of like across, like, Jaime, this is a hockey equivalent of a hit from behind, or a cross check, or
a sucker like punch. I mean,
after the play,
Rock had his hands behind his back because he thought that what he probably thought was, I told the joke, it didn't go over well. Will's going to come out and, like, you know, say into the microphone, like, you know, that wasn't funny, or you're an idiot, or just something to sort of, you know,
diffuse it,
or even to sort of, even to correct him, even if he came up and was just like, that's not funny, or don't talk about my wife, or whatever. But Rock was not expecting it at all. So he basically hit a defenseless man.
He did take a punch pretty well, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you see like he whacks him and there's no attempt to defend himself. He had no anticipation it was coming.
Yeah, exactly. And so the funny the thing about it is, and Carol made a point too, that what Will Smith should have done was, if he was that upset about it, he should have challenged Chris Rock by, like, saying, I don't think that was an appropriate thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but obviously, yeah. So I mean, anyway, so that's, you know, he lost control, but he, you know, he disappointed a lot of people, a lot of his fans, I would think. Anyway, so what do you have to say about it?
I may jump in there, buddy. I'm going to gather my thoughts.
There's a lot to unpack. What's a little unclear to me is how much Chris Rock knew going into this, because I feel very differently from he had no idea about the alopecia.
Yeah, I didn't either, so I can't see that. Yeah.
There's a difference between knowing nothing about it, maybe casually like, oh yeah, I think I saw that on Instagram, and then it's been 3 months, so you kind of forget it if it's not like you live and breathe that sort of thing. And then there's, continuing along that spectrum is, very solidly knew about it. And then there's sort of the wild card of like, decided to wing it, because I'm pretty sure that was not part of the script. We're just pretty sure he decided to improv there and got himself into some trouble. So there's that. And then there is the very strange reaction from Will Smith where, he does sit there and laugh. And then, his wife is not acting along with it. And what we critically don't see is at what point did he change his mind on what was happening there.
Yeah,
right? Because he was chuckling along too.
Yeah,
whether you believe it's a real one or not, he was not immediately enraged and then ran up there to hit this person. So there's a lot in that missing 10-ish seconds or so that I very much would like to see alternative angles.
Well, and there's also the other side of it too, is we don't know if there's any history between these two, right? Like, do they even know each other?
They do. They have worked together in the past.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
but I mean,
and they would have run in similar circles, obviously. I mean, we're talking about two of the most high-profile African American performers of the last 30 years. Like,
yeah.
It's inescapable. But I mean, so this obviously was just a disaster from top to bottom. I mean, there are people who criticize, Chris Rock, saying, well, his joke was inappropriate. There are obviously people who are critical of Will Smith's reaction. There are people who are critical of the Academy's reaction. There are people who are critical of Jim Carrey came out the other day and was lambasting the audience by basically saying, like, giving a standing ovation to Will Smith for winning the Oscar 20 minutes after this happened was an embarrassment for all of Hollywood. It's hard not to agree with that. I mean, you just witnessed something so off-putting and unpleasant and violent, and you're still showing this person love for this honor that he won that had, obviously don't have anything to do with each other, but how do you separate the art and the artist, right? Like, and the act and the artist. I think the most disappointing thing for me is that, beyond obviously, there is no excuse for solving these issues with violence, and there's no excuse for solving them like that. And, think about, we like the next day, nobody was talking about Coda. Nobody was talking about all these amazing performers. It should have been the pinnacle of all these performers' lives to have had this honor, and nobody's talking about any of that stuff. They're just talking about this incident. So he spoiled this for so many people. And again, it comes on the heels, like, he won for portraying the Williams sisters' father. And not only did they got this sort of public embarrassment after Jane Campion stuck her foot in her mouth at the directors or the I can't remember which awards it was recently before this, but then now the second award show in a row, they've gotten basically people aren't talking about the Williams sisters and how they overcame and what their father was like or anything else. They're just talking about Will Smith and this behavior and everything else. So it really diminishes the moment. But it's also extremely upsetting because, as I just said, these are two of the most high-profile African-American performers of the last 30 years. I hate the idea that there are narrow-minded people who are going to look at this and say, well, there you go, those two black men were fighting, and that's, that's emblematic of the behavior of black people, or anything that could be read into that. Like, it's so upsetting to see that it's going to be perceived as a black on black violence thing, which is, it's so upsetting that can be misread that way. And that there are narrow-minded people all over, especially America, who are doing that. it really, the whole thing just leaves a bad taste. I mean, I said, like I actually got home because obviously we were a little closer to the theater, so we got home and actually watched it live, and then I'm lucky enough that I can actually lip read. So when they bleeped it out here in North America,
you didn't have to be the good expert at lip reading to read that.
Oh no, but I mean, like in the moment, I was like, "Oh, he just said what he said," and my wife said, "Really?" And then he repeated himself, and I'm like, "No, that's exactly what he just said." And I watched for a few more minutes, and I just said to my wife, like, I'm not going to watch this show anymore. Like I'm sure there's going to be more and there's going to be whatever, but I'm out. I don't like the Oscars at the best of times. I found that they really have lost their luster over the last number of years. They've become, beyond the Oscars too white and so many other issues that there have been with the way that they decide their awards. I mean, really, it's a Hollywood event voted by Hollywood about Hollywood. Like, it has no connection to reality or, we've talked in the past about how, they pay lip service to, popular movies. They don't recognize performances that are, necessarily great just because they look down upon, the Marvel movies, the sci-fi movies and stuff like that. Like, they're not art, I have a tough time with the Academy Awards writ large, but this is just yet another stain on what has become an increasingly nonsensical and pointless thing. And I just fundamentally have a bit of a problem with the idea of pitting art against art. Like, it's strange. I mean, obviously we compare art, but we're comparing art, with the hope of spurring discussion, not like, and you get a gold statue and you don't. Like, the whole thing just leaves a really, really bad taste. And as you say, for me, it tarnishes Will Smith forever. Like, I have enjoyed him as a performer for, most of my life. Will and I are about the same age. I've always enjoyed his work. I haven't loved every movie he's ever done. I've enjoyed everything I've ever seen him in. But then, that's true of any artist. But I don't know that I could look at him the same way without thinking, like, was he always unhinged? Is this something lately? Is it his relationship with his wife? Obviously, there is the backstory of the book that he wrote last year and the challenges in their relationship and all of the different factors. It's so upsetting. We were talking, obviously we've talked about artist versus art in the past. We've talked about the Woody Allens. We've talked about the Pablo Picassos. We've talked about the people who are, doing these awful things, but can you still reconcile how great the art is? I don't know. I'm having a tough time.
Yeah, it's like Baby Driver. I love the movie. I love their director, but I can't watch the movie anymore.
Well, Kevin Spacey has ruined more than a few movies, but that being said, can you watch any Kevin Spacey movie? Like, LA Confidential is an amazing movie. Can you watch LA Confidential? Kevin Spacey's got a big part in it.
Yeah, and same with Seven, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, like those kind of things, but like he's clearly grooming the kid in the movie, which is what I take offense to. Right?
Yeah, particularly that.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I have the same problem with Billy Bob Thornton, not because of. I mean, I used to sort of like his movies. I couldn't figure out what it was I didn't like about him, but when he blew up at John Gameshi, of all people. on national radio live, I was listening to that episode when it was happening, and I just, my jaw dropped, and and it's been replayed on because they filmed Q at the same time, but it's been played back, and again, it's sort of like now I just, anything that has Billy Bob Thornton in it, I just don't watch it.
Yeah, well, It will be really interesting to see what the outcome is. We talked about how, obviously one of the things that has been discussed is that, he could face, expulsion from the Academy. It seems like he's going to be able to keep the award that he won, which, okay, fine. You won the award in a competition that had nothing to do with this event.
It would be nice if he could follow in the footsteps of Sidney Poitier and Denzel Washington, right? Like the only other two African Americans who have won that particular award. you know, and yeah, like he's, you know, just like Trump set America back, you know, 50 years, he's now set, you know, that struggle 50 years.
Yeah. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully we can view this in the context that which is somebody who's clearly having some mental health struggles.
Is this Tom Cruise jumping on the couch or Fonz jumping the shark? You know, like,
I mean, it's hard not to think that, but then, you know, I don't know. I mean, you know how Hollywood works. I mean, Mel Gibson was nominated for a freaking Oscar after being, you know, revealed to be a misogynist and anti-Semite and all these things. Like, I can't watch Mel Gibson movies anymore for the same reason. And
I used to be a big fan of his. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know, again, artists, you know, there will probably come a time again where I might be able to sit and watch, you know, Lethal Weapon 2 and be able to divorce who he was from the performance in the moment, but I'm not there yet. I mean, it's funny, they were going through the list of people who have been actually removed from the Academy, and the list was Harvey Weinstein. Okay, yep, I'm with you. Bill Cosby. Yep, I'm there for you. Roman Polanski. Okay, again, yes, I'm fine with that. And there was one other person whose name I didn't recognize, but apparently he was caught selling. Every year was selling all his screeners back when they used to give out physical screeners.
Really?
So 4 people ever have been kicked out of the Academy. And we're talking about, you know, somebody who was accused of having sex with a child, somebody who was accused of gross and egregious abuses of power with involving a lot of women, or 2 of them, I guess, and then somebody who apparently sold bootleg DVDs.
Well, and yet you got Woody Allen, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, he theoretically is still a member of the Academy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what is an appropriate punishment. I mean, apparently Chris Rock decided he didn't want to file. The police asked him afterwards if he wanted to file charges. He said no. Carol
asked me today, like one of the fallouts is that they announced today that Chris Rock's ticket sales have just completely sold out. And, you know, and they're being, you know, like it's been a big success for him in that sense, right? But the thing about it is like if you watch Chris Rock's show, he, like, you know, Eddie Murphy and Bill Cosby before him, he talks about his life, right? This is going to come out on stage.
Well, he had his first show since the Oscars apparently the other night, and I read that today, and he sort of said, you know, hey, and he made a little joke about it. He said, hey, how was everybody's weekend? Yeah. And but then he also told the crowd, like, I'm still processing all this. I don't really have anything to say about it beyond that. And, you know, it's a debate. Is the best outcome of this for him to dine out on it and make a whole routine about, like, I never saw it coming and here's my whole spiel about, like, what was going through my mind and do it part of his act and make, you know, $1 million off it? Or is it to be like, hey, I shouldn't have told that joke. It probably wasn't funny. I didn't anticipate that it was going to have that kind of outcome. I feel bad for Will that he's clearly got some struggles that he felt he needed to confront me like that. I'm going to move on. He should probably move on. And we should probably, like, you know, hopefully will seek help for whatever demons are haunting him right now. What's the best approach? I don't know. Do you?
Well, I can tell you from having watched, you know, all this sort of Seinfeld, not the episodes, but the sort of behind the scenes where he talks to comedians and stuff like that, and they talk about, you know, the way they work on their routines and stuff. I mean, like I've seen him do deep dives with, you know, David Spade and all kinds of different comedians, and they work on things. And they perfect them, and they perfect them, and they perfect them, and then they bring them out, and they, you know, they do them in like small rooms, and then they try them out on big audiences, and then they become part of the act. And like Seinfeld is famous for you know, retiring some of his bits, right? But it may never become part of Chris Rock's bit, but he's got like fodder for, you know, inside, like, side glance jokes for like the rest of his life, you know, like,
yeah,
like Amy Schumer came out and said, did I miss anything? Did anything happen while I was backstage? You know, like,
yeah. But then think about the moment. Like I've seen comments from her and from Wanda Sykes since then, and both of them, because we as the audience saw it and we're like, what's happening? Like, was that a deliberate thing? Was that a joke? Like, what happened? And then you realize, like, no, it's gone. Can you imagine being Wanda Sykes or Regina Hall or Amy Schumer, when you know this isn't part of the deal, and just seeing him come up stage, be thinking like, what's going to happen?
Or do you know? Or do you not know? I mean, like, do we like? How do we like? Of course, you know.
Oh, conspiracy Tim's out here. Hang on, conspiracy Tim's out.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, exactly, like the alleged slap. You know, like. I've actually also heard somebody say it was like some stuntman sort of said it wasn't a real hit. You know, like it didn't. You know, it looked. I mean, it looked fake because it was real.
Hit him, right? Because
I know. It looked fake because it was real. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, you know what I mean? Like a Hollywood punch looks completely different than a real punch. You know?
Well, and when Rock saw the hit coming, he rolled with it. He didn't. If he had just stood there, I mean, that's the other thing that's kind of brutal about this too. Like, Will Smith is a legitimate 6'3". Chris Rock is like a legitimate 5'8". When he saw that gigantic arm go up, he had to be thinking like, this is going to go badly. So he rolled with the punch, and he took it like a champ. But that's like, your life's got to flash before your eyes when that happens. Like, he could not have seen that was going to be what happened, especially with somebody as good-natured as Will appears to be.
The stage, and again, it's like, I was thinking about it. I didn't really think about it at the time, but like, it's ludicrous. Like, the stage was like a foot off the ground, right?
Yeah.
No security anywhere.
Nope.
Right? And they were sitting in armchairs like 5 feet from the stage. I mean, he's like, they're begging, like, it could have got a spit take and could have hit him. You know what I mean? Like,
it's true, but then, like, there's never been anything like this before. I mean, there was a streaker back in the 70s, like, but like, there's never been anything like this before.
Yeah, but there was the thing that reminds me of like, you know, taking away from somebody is when Taylor Swift won. I don't know, she beat up Beyonce or something like that. Yeah,
that's right. And Kanye came out,
when she was like 17 or something, like, you know, and it was like the first award show, whatever. And yeah, Kanye came out and tried to, you know, steal the moment from her, right? And he did. I mean, you know, we're still talking about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, anyway.
But at least he didn't walk up on stage and like push her over.
He practically did. He took the microwave phone away from her.
Yeah.
And he basically said, this is a travesty, that she shouldn't, like, she practically said, you know, she should not have won this award.
Yeah.
And I'm Kanye West, and therefore I've hated Conway. Yeah, okay, Conway West. Yes, Conway West.
Kanye West.
Ever since he did that, you know, I won't give him the time of day.
Yeah,
I won't listen to his music. I don't think he's a great artist. Whatever. I mean, and again, separating the art from the art, like you said, right?
Well, but that's the thing. If you can separate the art from the artist, he is a great artist. He's clearly got some demons. Yeah, he's got some demons. Yeah, I think it's all in all, I think obviously we've spent a bunch of time now talking about it, but it has dominated the conversation this week. I imagine it will continue for weeks to come. It's so unfortunate across the board. It's unfortunate for Will. It's unfortunate for Chris. It's unfortunate for the Academy. It's unfortunate for the public. It's unfortunate for civil rights. It's unfortunate for and there's no win out of this. There's no good that comes out of this. I hope that Will gets a chance to you know, make right on this at some point. I hope that, you know, that this is a blip in an otherwise amazing career. But I don't know how you live this down. And I hope that nothing but the best for him in the long run. But in the moment, you know, you should be ashamed of yourself. You really should.
Yeah. Oh, I can see who is nominated. Let's move on to the actual next story here, which is to talk about the awards. Now, you already mentioned that Dune won most of the awards for the night. But Apple's Coda wins big. Yeah, the thing about it is, you know, because of all what happened was, again, I got Rogered again. They, you know, I set my PVR. I should know better. Like, I don't know why I set it to what was the scheduled show time. You know, and I should have recorded the show afterwards, which when I'm thinking smartly, I do that so that because as soon as it ended before any of this, like, so I had to go online and watch the Jessica Chastain's speech and his speech. So I had no idea who they were nominated against, but here on this article you've got, I can see the other movies that were up against these movies, right? And so on and so forth. Like Kenneth Branagh, I had no idea who he was up against. Jane Champion. And
yep.
Yeah, so she beat out Steven Spielberg and Kenneth Branagh. But this was Kenneth Branagh's first Academy Award apparently this year, right?
First nomination, yeah.
No, he's been nominated before.
Oh,
he actually won.
He won for screenplay?
Best screenplay.
Yeah. No, I mean, it does. You hit those every once in a while where you think like, well, of course, after like that person would have it. But I mean, look at Jane Campion. Like, I mean, how did Jane Campion? Like, she's been as she pointed out so flawedly in that previous award speech. She's been fighting it out as one of the sort of premier directors in a male-dominated field for the last 25 years, making great movies. It's a strange one to look back on, but then you look back and you're like, oh, Martin Scorsese did not win an Oscar for insert 5 great movies until he finally won one for something that people will not remember. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he should have won for Casino. He should have won for Goodfellas.
Yeah, like he didn't win for Goodfellas. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. Well, and again, like they just sort of said that giving him was it Departed?
Yeah, I think he won for The Departed.
Yeah, that was a good movie, but it wasn't Goodfellas.
No.
And it wasn't Casino.
No.
Although I don't know if it might not be him. Anyway. Yeah, see, I had no idea Jessica Chastain for Eyes of Tammy Faye, which I saw the makeup the other day. It's unbelievable. I haven't seen the show yet because I'm not a huge Tammy Faye fan. But beating out Kirsten Stewart and Nicole Kidman and I thought Being Ricardos was amazing, right?
Yep.
And Olivia Colman, of course, who's like been winning awards. Like she won for all kinds of stuff previously, right?
I mean, she probably wears more makeup. Jessica Chastain more makeup than Doug Jones is Saru. I mean, they had to like pull out the spackle to make her look like Tammy Faye's heavily makeup style.
And what's his name? Andrew Garfield?
Yep.
From Tick, Tick, Boom?
He looked completely different.
Well, he was in that same movie. He played Jimmy Baker. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, it's totally. If you see a still of it, you're like, what? Well, we'll talk about the Colin Farrell in a bit, but anyway, have you seen the Batman, Tommy?
I've not seen the Batman. No.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we have to be very careful.
So, yeah. Looking at this list here, I didn't have anything that I really disagreed with. I think it was a pretty. I mean, you could quibble. I think it'd be like, well, maybe this one, but I didn't see any. Oh my gosh, they made a terrible mistake moments in any of these sort of the glory awards here.
Well, look, Hans Zimmer won another Academy Award.
The mistake for Best Original Song was not in what's here in the list, but in
it's what not. Yeah,
it's like there's a reason they put "We Don't Talk About Bruno" as a special performance because that's the one that Encanto should have submitted, not the wonderful, beautiful Dos Oruguitas, but the catchier one that everybody knows and is going to be baby sharking from now till the end of time is "We Don't Talk About Bruno."
Well, they literally put a sing-along version of Encanto on Disney Plus because of the popularity of that song. Like, that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. So going with what's here, I'm like, oh yeah, the No Time to Die of Billie Eilish. It's a very James Bond song. It's a good song. I think it probably loses to "We Don't Talk About Bruno" if that was if that was submitted for nomination, but it wasn't. So I'm like, oh, okay, nothing to go here. And when I saw all the technical awards, I was like, yep, this is a good pee breaker because Dune is winning all of these. So,
yeah, I thought Dune was going to sweep it like that happens with the Oscars, like one movie comes in and just steals all the awards.
Yeah, I mean, Dune feels like it got treated like Peter Jackson's first 2 Lord of the Rings movies. Like, we'll get you later.
Really?
That's the vibe I got. Like, even when it was nominated, people were like, yeah, but it's up against this, this, and this, so it'll never win. And it won all the technical awards, which is exactly what Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring did and Two Towers did. And it got nominated for Best Picture, as those two did. But I found it bothersome because I honestly think that Return of the King is the worst of the Peter Jackson original trilogy.
It is 100%.
It is 100%. The least best told story. It is clunky. It doesn't work well as a story.
But it was hard to watch.
It's just, and it's too long. Like, even the original cut was too long, and yet they basically kept like, oh no, we're not going to give you the first one. Oh no, you're not going to get for the second one. Okay, now for having completed the trilogy, here's your Oscar for Best Picture and Best Director. And I was like, the first and second pictures are better than those. They're better made movies. They're better performances. There are, and frankly, I think the first one deserves it just because of the sort of visionary scope of it. And yet, like, I was looking at this one and I was thinking, like, yeah, Denis Villeneuve kind of got done dirty here, because they're, I'm sure, looking at it thinking, well, they're going to make at least one more of these things. We'll get you on the next one. And I think that's a shame, because it
which is dumb, because COVID could happen, you know.
That's it, right? And or you know, Timothée Chalamet could be hit by a bus tomorrow. Like, I don't know. To me, it exactly. it again, it speaks to the way that the Academy does business, and this is part of the reason why I kind of have been out on them for a while. Is it's not about best. It's about politics. It's about cronyism. It's about lifetime achievement. There's so many nonsensical things balanced in here, like it's just awful. One of the best things I've ever heard was Bill Simmons from The Ringer has maintained for a long time that you should never give out an Oscar or any major award until 5 years have passed. That you should wait and let the impact of things soak in before you decide them. Because if you go back at least 5 years and look at all of these awards, you change at least half of them. It's so hard to decide in the moment, because it's about who had the best, marketing campaign behind the scenes. It's who took the right people to lunch. It's all these things. It's not about how does the quality of the work stand, the test of time. Again, you talk about Forrest Gump versus Pulp Fiction. You talk about, so many of these instances in the past where you're like, how did that win in the moment? And you realize, you don't know half of it, right?
Yeah.
That is an interesting idea to do. The only Hall of Fame I'm familiar with is the NFL Hall of Fame, which you are not eligible to join till after 5 years, I want to say, from your retirement.
Mm-hmm.
So, like Tom Brady, for example, was ticking the clock down for about 2 minutes and then is back on the 5-year clock for whenever he retires. And maybe that's a kind of an interesting idea to do a best picture of 5 years ago sort of approach.
Well, it's just so hard in the moment, right? Like, how do you, when you get these sort of crushes during quote unquote awards season, and you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and who are the power players who are making all these different things happen, and momentum changes on these pictures based on there was some speculation that Jane Campion may have cost herself an Oscar when she stuck her foot in her mouth about making a comparison with the Williams sisters and how she had to overcome things as a director versus what they had to overcome as black tennis players, which is stupid, objectively, but she still managed to win the Oscar, and good for her. But, in the moment, things happen, right? In the campaigning, things happen.
Well, but it's funny, like you just said that, like it's totally inappropriate for her to say that, but it's kind of like we're comparing apples and oranges and saying, well, this is the best fruit, like in the Academy Award process in general, right? Like you can't compare what the Williams sisters went through to what Jane Campion went through, and yet they're on the same ballot, practically, anyway. I mean, but men do it all the time in male circles. We compare ourselves to other males who completely are not comparable.
Yeah, and again, I don't mean to obviously single her out in this. I'm just saying that this is an example of some of the things that come up during these campaigns, for sure. Again, it's crazy in retrospect when you look back at some of these things. You're like, oh, how did that person win that award? How did this film get to that spot? And obviously, we'll never know the whole story on some of these, but some of them you're going to look back on and be like, well, I mean, we talked about it even when we did the Spocky Awards. I still think I think Spider-Man: No Way Home was a better film, or a better movie. I think Dune was a better film. Right. Dune is big and grand and cinematic and beautiful. And I'm sure that those same weightings are happening in the minds of the people who vote from the Academy. They're like, well, I think Dune is big and beautiful and I enjoyed it, but hey, this is the 6th time that I've watched a movie by so-and-so, and I think they deserve, something different,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, if you ask me about, I don't know. I was gonna say that if you ask me about Denis Villeneuve's work, I think Arrival was a better movie. But what can I say? I'm wrong again. Let's move on.
Yes.
Let's move on.
Yes.
Let's talk about this next year.
Yes.
All right. So, yeah, this is a follow-up from last week's show. Netflix is, in fact, a fan of Spotcast because they've decided to go after password sharing. And there you go. So we talked about it last week, and they were testing it, I guess, in smaller markets.
They were, yeah.
Yeah, but now apparently maybe it was such a successful campaign after a week. I don't know what the story is. But yes, they've announced that they're going to go after password infringers.
And again, yeah, I still am really curious to see how they can pull this off.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
It's a tricky one because I see that they want to, recoup that revenue that's potentially there, but you could also cause a backlash where people start evaluating whether they really need it, and given that there's Disney Plus, Hulu, Apple TV Plus, etc., it's a much different competitive game now than just 5 years ago.
Yeah, and again, Jaime, you often say vote with your dollars, right? And I can see that they're saying that here some people on Twitter are saying, "Oh, I'll never use Facebook or Facebook. I'll never use Netflix if this is the case." But I don't really think that those kind of campaigns really matter in the grand scheme of things, because I think the majority of sheeple will continue to use Netflix, right? So it's hard to say. I mean, it's kind of like, again, from an infrastructure point of view, it's challenging. I think you're gonna annoy more people than not. I mean, if you we already have paywall annoyances. I don't know about you, Jaime, but if you use a personal Bitbucket or GitHub account, now that we have, they've gone away from simple username and password because I guess their systems were so hackable, to these convoluted, two-factor authentication things that make professional developers pull their hair out. It's a tough, trying to stop people from getting into things that they shouldn't get into is a challenge, and nobody has solved it yet. We talk about on the other show about getting rid of passwords and going to all kinds of other things. We have fingerprint ID and we have Face ID, and how are they going to hey Dad, I want to watch what's a movie called Turning Red or whatever. Come and look at the screen for me for a minute.
Yeah.
My favorite thing I saw when Touch ID first came out is a man is sleeping on the couch and his kid takes his finger and starts lowering it onto the iPhone, right? Anyway, yeah. I mean, what are they going to do, right?
I guess we'll find out.
How will we know, though?
Well, I guess at some point they'll send a letter to the people who are doing this. I can't imagine that somewhere in our networks we don't know somebody who's doing this nefarious deed.
Maybe we should poll our audience or whatever.
There you go.
Well, it's like the Game of Thrones when they went after the BitTorrent downloads, right? And they sent everybody a letter, and we noticed you're downloading I actually got I think I may have done that at one point in my career. And got a message from my internet provider saying, "Hey, we noticed your IP address downloaded, the latest episode of, Game of Thrones." I've forgotten the name of the character that Dinkus plays.
Oh, Peter Dinklage, Tyrion.
Yeah, Tyrion. Tyrion's really mad at you. That's all I could imagine was Tyrion coming over to yell at me about it.
Well, no, they're gonna send was it the mountain? The mountain.
The mountain.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's 6 foot 8-inch behemoth shows up at your door. We don't like what you're doing.
What was the one that was half dead or whatever?
That's right? The one. Yeah. That's the mountain.
Or Arian's going to put me on her list.
That's right. You've made Arya's list.
Yeah. I mean, spoilers for those of you who haven't watched Game of Thrones. Anyway. All right, Jaime, over to you.
I feel terrible calling this a first world problem, but this article here was one that I don't know how it showed up. Maybe the algorithm decided, hey, this person likes Sonic the Hedgehog. As somebody who's watched the movie, the Sonic the Hedgehog sequel is coming out rather soon, and McDonald's is getting Happy Meal toys in Indonesia, not in North America apparently. So sorry, North American kids, but you can take a look at the cool screenshots and be like, man, wish I had those with some McNuggets.
You have to go to Indonesia to get these?
That's the only place that's had this officially come out. It's so weird that we're so close to what's the release date? Like the 7th, probably 7th or 8th. It's coming up real soon.
I think it's like
8th,
next week. Yeah.
And normally they have these right in line with the release of the movies, and I've not seen anything. So I don't know what you're going to do, kids. Cry into your McNuggets. I guess
maybe they couldn't afford to ship them in the container ship or whatever.
It probably was something like, the container ship that's stuck. What is it? The Ever Forward or whatever it is that's stuck.
Oh yeah.
Well, these are going to be worth a lot at the next Fan Expo, right?
Yeah, it's true. Rare Indonesian McDonald's toys. Get online now.
Yeah, exactly. Crazy. That's crazy. All right. And over to Jonathan, I guess. No, we got one more from Jaime.
Still me.
Good news. Jaime is next.
Yeah, so in the everybody could see this coming thing. So Crunchyroll, which recently not merged, was acquired by Sony, which owns Funimation, the other big anime streaming service, is going to be a lot more restrictive when it comes to what do you get for free for your ad watching experience. So historically, Crunchyroll has had this whole sort of thing where you can watch anime as it's premiering in Japan. If it's something you pay for the premium service, you get to see it, I think, as it releases there. If you're cheap like me, then you wait a week and you're always behind, but you see the episode for free with ads. Well, they're not fully doing away with that, but they're essentially doing away with free stuff. So you'll get a, quote, sampler stuff. So you can, probably watch an episode or two of series, but you're going to have to fork up, what is it, $7.99 a month if you want to actually watch stuff, at least for new and returning series. It's really unclear if they're going to do like a exclusivity window and then, all right, it's been 3 or 6 months or whatever. Here you go, kids. You can watch this stuff for free with ads. But it's definitely a bummer for somebody who's mooched as much as I have.
All good things, they say, and time must end. Jaime, sorry.
Yeah, because the ads didn't bother me. Because that's why nature gave us smartphones to fill the gap.
That's why nature and Tim Cook.
Exactly. So thought that was worth mentioning because I will see what happens here. Because as a perfect example, this season I am watching the Shenmue anime. Mm-hmm. And I tried to watch it on Crunchyroll because I said, clearly I'll be able to watch it in Japanese there. And it refused to let me watch. It was like, fork over money, you chump. I was like, that's weird. Realized, I can actually get it on Cartoon Network for the Adult Swim part, which I just record that through my YouTube TV. So this is unfortunate for somebody like me. I'm going to have to start thinking about what I do with this. Do I collect this service or do I wait to see what they do with the free stuff? But something for people to consider as they're fighting for your dollars sort of thing.
Well, I'm going to stick in an impromptu a public service announcement, piggybacking off of our conversations about Netflix and Crunchyroll. So I noticed it was probably several months back, maybe even 6 months back, that the Google Play app disappeared off of my Samsung Smart TVs. And I thought, well, that's unusual.
Oh, really?
And I thought, why would they do that? It doesn't make sense because when what was it called? The other streaming service that they had for the longest time. They used to buy, if you bought a physical copy of a movie, they would give you a digital copy. Some of them came through iTunes, and some of them came through, I want to say it was like UX, or there was some.
Yeah, it was
Ultraviolet. Ultraviolet.
Yeah.
And then Ultraviolet announced that it was going out of business, and so Google picked up the rights to a lot of those, so you basically got your movies transferred over to Google Play.
Or you lost them completely.
Or if you didn't know in time, you lost them completely. So I managed to transfer a lot of mine over, so I have probably, 20 or 25 different movies and TV shows that I bought over the years that were on the Google Play Store, and the only way to watch them on your television set was to use the Google Play app. So, okay, fine. And then it just disappeared, and it basically said Samsung no longer supports this app. I was like, oh, weird. So it just, it deletes. You're like, oh, it's gone. It was not until this week that I finally looked it up and was like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, how am I supposed to watch those things if I don't have that app? Apparently what they've done is they've integrated it into the YouTube app. So,
really?
Because they own YouTube, the way that they've done it is if you log in using your Google login on your Samsung TV on your YouTube app, which they still support.
It also works on Apple TV, by the way. Yeah.
Then you can go into a subsection that basically says My Library, and in your library will be anything that you own a digital copy of.
Right.
So it's basically they've turned YouTube into the one-stop shop for not just YouTube videos, but also for Google Play content. So I say this as someone who apparently had his head deeply buried in the sand and did not know what he was missing out on for 6 months for no good reason. It would have been nice if they put it in the notification that just said this app is no longer being used. To see your Google Play movies, go to the YouTube app. But they didn't do that. They just said this app is no longer supported. Go away. But apparently,
that's the Google Play Store. Yeah, Google Play Store doing that.
Yeah. So. Good news, I still can watch those movies. The bad news is that, and I cannot recall for the life of me if the Google Play Store previously had higher res content. I feel like they did, but I went to look at that stuff on my TV when I did log in the other day, and all of it was 1080p. There was no 4K content at all. So
yeah, that sounds familiar to me too, because I own the From the Earth to the Moon, and I've been watching it on. I think it came out on Prime or Crave or something, because all of a sudden the quality got better.
Yeah, and to be fair, like that's where the iTunes has been a nice plus, is that they have basically, as the movies have been up-resed, they have just basically added those into your previous purchases. So if you purchased it as a 1080p add-on to a Blu-ray disc, they just upgraded it to 4K, which is nice because then you have a 4K version and you don't have to necessarily run right out and buy the 4K HD DVD if you want to watch that movie in 4K. But in this case, the Google Play ones, they're still 1080p, which is unfortunate. So,
well, speaking of like impromptu things and high res, I just happened to, I was poking around on Amazon today and I managed to get myself a free copy of Superman #1 and Detective Comics #27, which for those of you driving and transporting at home are the original Superman and Batman comics for free. So I opened up my Comixology app and it said to me, "Hey, you boob, re-download your comic books because they just published them all in high res."
Oh,
higher res, yeah. So if you've already downloaded your collection, go back and re-download it again.
Yeah, I guess it depends if you're down. Like I have a large enough digital comic book library that I wouldn't want them all on my phone.
That would be a pain in the butt. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But now I have a high res copy of Detective Comics #27.
There you go.
In glorious high res. It's like big blobs of red and big blobs of yellow. It's not like not like Archie's Summer Splash, which is the other one I got.
Yep. All right. Back to our headlines. Got a few more before we break into our Picard and Moon Knight and all the other good stuff. But okay, so this one definitely was a weird, out of the blue story. Bruce Willis announced this week that he's retiring from acting because he has been diagnosed with aphasia, which is a disorder that makes it difficult for the brain's language center and your ability to speak. So this, I don't know how you guys felt about it, but it just came out of nowhere. There was no preamble, nothing else. And obviously, Bruce is 67, so he's getting a little older. But yeah, it just came out of nowhere that he was just like, "Yep, I'm done. No more acting. I'm gone." And it's weird. It almost felt a little bit like somebody's sudden death. Like just the idea that he's done. Like he's not going to act anymore. He's not, like, he's just gone. And this is somebody who's been at the center of popular culture since 86. Like it seems so sudden and so somewhat shocking to have him just be like, this release came out and it was just like, and he's gone. Iconic characters, obviously, John McClane from Die Hard, Pulp Fiction, he's been, Looper, like in the sci-fi world, this guy's been in a bunch of stuff, The Surrogates and Looper and all these great sci-fi movies, Sixth Sense. I mean, it's just kind of, it's funny because, he's a little like Nick Cage in the way, and I hate to make this comparison because Nick Cage is clearly insane, but I felt about him the same way that I felt about Nick Cage. Like, does he owe somebody money? Like, what's why? He makes like amazing movie, and then like 3 terrible movies, and then an amazing movie, and then like 3 terrible movies. Does he just really like to work, or does he really like money? Like, what? It seems like for the last number of years, I'll see movies pop up on my streaming services where I'm like, is that Bruce Willis? Why is Bruce Willis in this weird B-movie looking thing?
Yeah.
So, it's not like he's been producing nothing but, Oscar gold for his career. But I mean, we're talking about one of the most bankable box office stars for 30 plus years. Like, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. The YouTube video that I shared with you all about the Red Letter Media folks covered this weird Bruce Willis factory, movie factory phenomenon. And it was, at the time, a little bit strange to me. I was like, oh, that's kind of like a weird way to get a payday, where he apparently makes like a significant amount of money, given the time he has to spend. It'd be like, oh, he'll make like $1 or $2 million, but only have to spend like a day shooting, right? So you can like crank out a whole bunch of these. And they had said that they had noticed that in a lot of them, he's like CGI'd in, or it's like shot reverse shot where you never actually see him and the other person, kind of thing. They use a lot of body doubles to reduce the amount of time that he needs to actually be on set. And they even put a little bug in his ears so that he doesn't even have to remember the lines. They're just telling him the lines.
Wow.
And he's saying them. So at the time I was like, wow, that's kind of a weird thing. And then when this came out, I'm kind of like, oh, maybe he was already having troubles with the aphasia stuff, and maybe this is like a Walter White Breaking Bad, I'm going to leave a crap ton of money for my family while I'm still able to work, sort of thing. It puts a whole different twist on it.
True. Yeah.
I mean, the New York Times piece, which I linked into our notes, makes the fair point at the end of the article. Since 2015, Willis's filmography has mostly been an onslaught of B-movie action productions. And then according to his IMDb page, Willis currently has nearly 10 movies in post-production. So he's not completely gone, although I don't know that any of those movies are necessarily some things that we're going to have to rush out to a theater to see. I don't know that these are like, must-see movies that he was working on. But yeah, like I say, it's so strange to just have it be like, and he's gone. It's like, honestly, it felt as sudden and surprising as Taylor Hawkins dying. It was just like, what? Like, he's just gone?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, you could say another comparison would be Michael J. Fox too. Just all of a sudden, not all of a sudden.
But then Michael's been working in spite of his Parkinson's.
Yeah, in spite of his Parkinson's. Yeah, he has, true, and he's been doing voiceovers and stuff like that, and he actually's on stage being a guy with Parkinson's too sometimes, right?
Well, and obviously, it does come down to the affliction too. Obviously, aphasia is going to impair Willis's ability to not only work, but to make public appearances. Obviously, if he would be self-conscious, or who knows how he will deal with what's going on. But I mean, not everybody has the impulse to do what Michael J. Fox did with his condition, and run out to center stage and be like, we need to stop this.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like people forget these, Hollywood heroes are people first.
Yep.
Yep. And just because you might have a really good day at work one day, but they don't expect you to do that every single day you don't work, right?
Yeah. All right. Next up, we were talking about this a few episodes back. What will happen during Umbrella Academy Season 3 with Elliot Page? Because obviously, in the time since there has been a Season 2, Elliot has transitioned to become a man, the actor formerly known as Ellen Page. And the question was, how do they incorporate Elliot's transition? Do they incorporate Elliot's transition? Will Elliot be playing a female role? How will that work? And so this week we got our first little taste of it with a tweet that came out, and Elliot posted an image, and it says simply, "Meet Victor Hargraves." And from that we get the hint that obviously we're going to see that character from the show transition from being a woman to a man, as Elliot himself is, or I should say they themselves, they prefer they them pronouns, as Elliot themselves has done. It's it's going to be interesting to see how they build that in. It's certainly not something that has been done in that way in a show, although again there is a logical sort of progression from season 2 where the character that Elliot plays was involved in a same-sex romance as a woman with another woman. It's possible that is the foreshadowing to a desire to transition into becoming a man. And it seems like obviously that's the intention that they seem to be following. But yeah, I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how they build that into what is already a really interesting and thoughtful show. The way that it dealt with their character last season, I thought was really, really quite lovely in the way that it was handled, and I'm sure that they're going to be very thoughtful and careful in the way that they do this and try and do it in a very affecting and well told way. So I'm really curious to see how this comes together. What are your impressions, guys?
Well, I mean, Elliot Page is on the Oscars the other day, and clearly, has already started, some chemical therapy and changed the voice, right? So that would be difficult to. Yeah, to play a female voice with a man's voice, right?
Yeah,
or male voice. Yeah,
yeah. I was kind of thinking about that too when I saw the Oscars. I was like, oh, okay, that's going to be a lot more difficult to work in, sort of after the fact. So presumably they would have had to been kind of in communication about what's going on to work it into the story and do the script writing.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, something to look forward to on top of what was already a great series. So it's coming back on June 22nd on Netflix. A couple quick ones before we go into the mains. So House of Dragons, the prequel to Game of Thrones, we finally got a premiere date. So we knew that it was coming this year. There was some speculation that it was going to come in spring or early summer. Now we know it's coming on the 21st of August. So a little bit of a wait still, although we've got a pretty packed TV calendar right now, so I'm not dying for that. And timing wise, obviously, people's attention turns back to television more, I think, as we get into towards the fall. So it makes sense to start it there. But
is that the HBO Max stuff?
So it's on HBO Max, but this is an HBO writ large, so it's going to be everywhere HBO on the 21st. And of course, this is the prequel set 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones, focusing on the Targaryen Empire and sort of their, I guess, downfall. And Matt Smith is one of the main stars of this, of course, famously Doctor Who. Emma Darcy's playing Princess Rhaenyra. So it's going to be an interesting thing. But they really haven't given us a great look at it yet. We've only gotten these sort of very abstract kind of glimpses at the world. We really haven't gotten a real taste of what we're going to see, what the plot is, how it's going to come together. As we've discussed on the show, I'm not a huge fan of prequels, but at least in this circumstance, they're certainly going to cover some ground that's been covered in George R.R. Martin's backstories and supplemental stuff that he's talked about. But it's at least it's far enough away. It's not like it's one generation before where you're like, oh, we're going to see everybody's as a kid, like at least it's 200 years is enough time that there can be intimations about relationships that are to come and everything. But really, it's kind of got to stand on its own legs. And I think that's what gives me like a smidgen more hope than maybe some of the prequel material we've dealt with in the past. We talked about, obviously, with Discovery, starting just 10 years before the original series, it felt a little fraught. We talked about, obviously, Enterprise being in enough proximity that there were these opportunities for crossovers that are just too tantalizing at times. My only other thought on this is that this is Game of Thrones, and Game of Thrones is obviously a world built on magic, and, Lord knows what you could cook up in a world where you're dealing with magic, right? Oh, this character's actually, turns out they were immortal and they've always been around. And oh, this character traveled back in time through sorcery. And, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that this is going to be good, but I'm also just a little trepidatious.
Yep. Yeah, it will be interesting to see if they can pull the mojo back out here because it is sort of weird how Game of Thrones has fallen off of the sort of collective radar for people, and this might be a way to rekindle that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is, Game of Thrones was the most monocultural event I think we've had in a number of years, where people sat down at 9:00 on a Sunday night and watched it together. It was one of the rare things beyond a major sporting event that actually had people all tuning in at the same time. I remember when the final season was happening and we were doing our sort of recaps and chatting about it, the real tough calls sometimes where it was like, well, there's a Raptors playoff game and they're on their run to a championship and there's a new episode of Game of Thrones. I can't decide what I'd rather watch, it was huge. It was huge. All right. Next up, we got news that the Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries is being pushed back very slightly. It was set initially to debut on the 25th of May. It was supposed to be on the 25th of May, and now it's been pushed to the 27th. It's been pushed back by 2 days, but I guess in a make good, or they had a little trailer come out today with Ewan McGregor saying, well, we're so sorry that we're moving it back for 2 days, but they also announced they're going to drop the first 2 episodes of a 6-episode series on the same day, which is interesting. It's kind of a choice. Definitely
I don't fully understand it.
Yeah.
Did they give an explanation for why suddenly the 2?
I don't know. And it's funny because it also goes against it. We talked about initially, so the Star Wars Disney Plus series used to debut on Fridays, and then the Marvel series were doing the same thing, and then they moved them all back to Wednesdays for, I'm sure, reasons having to do with their data, their analysis of how days work best for them. And now they're pushing this one back to Friday. So I don't understand. I don't know what's going on, why they're doing it that way, but I guess it's good that the series will be that much more compact. We'll get 2 episodes right off the hop, and then it'll only take 4 more weeks and it'll be all told. But yeah, sort of, again, another weird out of the blue announcement today. And last thing I've got, just a bit of sad news. I had talked about Miracle Man on a previous episode and how it is one of my very favorite comic book series. They're collecting it in this beautiful omnibus edition that's coming out from Marvel later in 2022 in the fall. Unfortunately, we got bad news this week that Gary Leach, who was the initial artist on that series, has died. I must admit I hadn't kept up a lot with his career since Miracle Man. I've read a few of the books that he'd worked on, but he was 67, and apparently he died on March the 26th, according to his publisher. This information just came out this week, and he was not massively known here in North America. Very influential in UK comics, working on 2000 AD and Warrior and Judge Dredd and just some of the staple British comics of the 80s, 90s and on. And just it's always sad when you lose somebody whose work you admire. And in this case, I just wanted to give a shout out to Gary because his work was definitely something that stayed with me. His sort of very detailed, very, 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 very beautiful work will always stay with me. And very sad to see him go.
All right, well, we're at that part of the show where we talk once again about something Star Trek shaped, and this time we're going to talk about communication badges. No, actually, we're going to talk about Star Trek Picard, Fly Me to the Moon, Season 2, Episode 5. And I'm going to do the recap. So we start off with, on the Shango ship, which is talking to Houston. It's obviously a some sort of Apollo type, mission, obviously being shaken around, and Houston's telling the female astronaut that, there's some debris coming her way, and she's struggling to deal with that. And then we flash over to Picard, and I'm going to do air quotes, Laris. I've just transported into a room, a house. And turns out we find out that this is actually, Talon is the name of the lady, not Laris. Played by the same actor, obviously. And she's tells Picard that she's transported to to her home because she feels safer there. That she can get rid of and dispatch him if she needs to, no problem. And he mentions. She says, "There's that name again," when he calls her Laris, and then she explains that her name is actually Talon. And he mentions Q again, and she says, "What's a Q?" and that kind of thing, right? So then she tells Picard that basically she's a supervisor, and she's there to basically protect the timeline, kind of thing, right? And in the conversations that they're having, he ends up telling her that he's Jean-Luc Picard, which kind of, she kind of raises an eyebrow at that, right? So we flash back over to the Shango. And it turns out that it's about to crash into the Earth, and they start Houston's doing a countdown kind of thing, and they go 3, 2, 1, boom, you're dead. And we find out that the Shango is actually a simulator, not really a proper ship. And the astronaut is trying to go through simulations to see how she would fare. And Talon tells Picard that the launch is in 3 days, and it's obviously going to be a big deal. And having told Talon that his name is Jean-Luc Picard, she says, "Well, I'm actually here to protect, an ancestor of yours named Renee Picard, who is the actress we talked about last week, and or the character we talked about last week." And of course, Picard says, "Well, she's of great importance to our timeline." So they start to he's trying to figure out what it is about this particular. What event, of course, what event caused the breakup in the timeline? Where was the deviation? And he's starting to think that this might be something to do with her mission. And we saw her last week. She's wearing a Europa mission outfit, and so is Q in the last scene we saw them in, right? Meanwhile,
well, and it's worth flagging in there. So that's where the sort of weird mystery we sort of speculated on at the end of last episode, because at that point, Q snaps his fingers and nothing happens. It's when he's trying to affect Renee.
Her. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. So, meanwhile, back in the Sorrentos, what's the name of the ship? Titos, what's it called? Anyway, back on the ship. The Borg Queen is there by herself, all alone, bemoaning the fact that she's alone. But she can hear these voices. She's getting these senses of she hears conversations in her head, kind of thing, and she realizes that there's some sort of like primitive network that she's picking up. And so she somehow decides or figures out that these are cellular signals, cellular phone calls. And so she attempts to hack the computer with voice recognition to try and get access. And so she tries her own voice, and the computer says not authorized. And she mimics Agnes. And the computer says not authorized. She tries Picard. And finally, she tries to imitate Rios. And of course, she gets online. She's able to connect to the outside world on the cellular network. And so the first thing she does is she calls the operator and asks them to connect her to the La Barre France constabulation, police station, basically. And she lures the police to the chateau by saying, "Help! I'm being repressed, and I'm a woman. I'm being attacked," and that kind of stuff. So they say, "We'll dispatch somebody right away. Via vite, come quick." Then we flash over to Raffi and Seven, who are, we see Rios's bus coming down the road, and they're still trying to figure out a way to stop the bus and arguing back and forth about how to do it. They think they should get. Agnes to beam Rios out of the right off the bus, and of course, Seven's arguing about how the fact they can't use technology to give away. So if they beams off of a bus, obviously going to draw attention and cause a fracture in the timeline. And
that's a weird one too, because they just established in the previous episode that they had to stop the police car because the transporter couldn't lock on while the thing was moving. Right. So that one seemed a little bit strange to go from one episode to the other.
Yeah, hold on to your hat for a second. So they're arguing about the use of technology to do this kind of thing, and Seven finally, demands that Raffi give her the tricorder, and she finally realizes if she says please nicely, then Raffi will give in and gives it to her. So Seven basically takes the tricorder and EMPs the bus to basically stop it, dead in its tracks. And she says something that's not moving is vulnerable. So they decide to go and attack the ship or attack the bus. And at the same time, Rios is telling the rest of the prisoners in Spanish to get ready because his friends are coming to get them out. And so he starts to tussle with the guard, who, of course, the guard opens the door
Yeah, that's a great first move.
Yeah, that's always a good first move. Yeah, so and of course Rios attacks him, and then Pedro does a double-handed bonk on the head. Where would we seen that move before? Somewhere on the
axe chop move.
Yeah, it was like Greg the Hammer Valentine from 1990s wrestling.
Yeah. Well, they did that on. Somebody did that on one of our episodes, and we were talking about how that's kind of a weird move. But anyway, so and then as they get off the bus, he sees Rafi and Seven are helping people off the bus, and Pedro's at the front of the bus texting somebody madly, which I thought was kind of interesting. I wonder if that's going to come back, because they've obviously introduced Pedro as a key figure, because he does have a few lines and things like that, right? And he's got the double-handed hammer punch or whatever. Back in Talon's apartment, they're still talking about the timelines and things like that, and of course Picard has to throw back to the the original series where I think we talked about this too, where there was a character trying to influence a launch that had to happen, and the character was Gary Seven, who was also recruited by the supervisors to come and help make sure that this particular event happened, right? Kirk and Spock thought he was there to blow up the ship or blow up the Apollo rocket, but in fact he was there to make sure it took off, right? And then we see that, Tannen shows Picard that Renee, there is a challenge with Renee, because she's in a session, in a therapy session, and the voice to me sounded a lot like John Delancey. I don't know what you guys, but
doing a bad French accent.
Bad French accent, and sometimes almost sounded like a woman at some point, because you didn't really see, to the back of the head, but it was gray hair, so clearly to us it's, we know who it is, right? And we already established that he's in close proximity to her. Mm-hmm. Of course, Talon starts telling about some of Renee's accomplishments, an expert sailor at 10, and doing chemical theory at 11, and became an expert pilot, so naturally was recruited by NASA. They couldn't wait to get their hands on her, as she says. But the problem is she deals with anxiety and depression, which is why she's in therapy. And Talon is concerned that she may, in fact, not make it on this particular flight. And of course, the thing I didn't say about Talon is she's able to monitor her, but she's not able to interfere. Like, she's not allowed to go and make herself known to the person. They're just sort of there to sort of be a guardian angel, if you will, kind of thing. And she says she's not really sure if she's going to survive this depression and anxiety that she's dealing with, right? And the Europa mission is in 3 days, and Picard's like, oh, but that's an important mission. She has to be on that ship, right? And so she starts to show the therapy session, and Picard's like, that's private, and looks at it and goes, is it? Yeah, and then we hear the therapist is trying to dissuade Renee from the ship, like from going on the mission. Like, what could possibly happen if you didn't go on? And Picard sort of says, hey, wait a minute, can you turn the camera around so I can see who the therapist is? And of course, clearly it's Q, right? He's like, that's Q. Now we flash over to a brand new part of the show where we see Adam Sung trying to convince a board of investors or directors or whatever, one of which is Leah Thompson, who we established. Howard the Duck's Leah Thompson.
Howard the Duck's Leah Thompson, yes, it's important.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about, his research and giving the big, life or death sort of speech about genetics and things like that and how it's important, blah, blah, blah. And we find out in a flashback that he's actually got a daughter at home who's got a genetic disease, ironically, because he's a geneticist. And it's played by, forgotten her first name,
Isabel. Isa
Barones, yeah.
Yep.
So Jonathan's wish to have her back on the show has been granted.
Yeah, and we should say for the record that Adam Sung, of course, is supposed to be an ancestor of Noonien Sung, the creator of Data, and of course played by Brent Spiner. So, I mean, in the ultimate convenience, we're just going to bring back Brent Spiner to play Adam Sung, who just coincidentally looks identical over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years. And his daughter, Corey Sung, is played by Isa Briones, who looks exactly like that. Anyways, all that was really far-fetched for me, but I was like, okay, well, I'm happy to see them both. I like both the performers, whatever.
Well, it's funny. I didn't have this in my notes, but Raffi's sort of giving Picard the third degree about how, in fact, Talon looks exactly like Alaris, and he's like, yeah, whatever, just a coincidence kind of thing. And she goes, and he kind of brushes her off, and she kind of goes, good talk.
Yeah, we're gonna have to dissect that at the end of this recap.
Yeah, so Corey, as Jonathan mentioned, is at home. We flash back and forth between this board presentation and him looking at his daughter, taking blood samples and putting her. He's got this amazing computer. I don't know what they're going to do in the next 2 years to invent this computer that can instantly diagnose whether somebody's 99% has a chance of dying or whatever. That's what the result is on the screen. I love computers like that, Hammy? But he tells her, of all the things I've learned in all the years that I've been working on stuff, people are idiots, right? They didn't buy into his thing. She mentions, Leah Thompson mentions in chastising him at the end of his speech that he's, been doing, genetic research without a proper approval and criteria and working for a military organization and things like that. And she had broken the Shenzhen Convention. Do we know anything about this?
I think that is a legitimate thing. That's against the it's against human experimentation and cloning and yeah.
All right, so it's a contemporary thing. It's not something that's a future, like the third treaty of Versailles.
It's not from the Star Trek galaxy. It's actually a real thing. Okay,
got it.
Yeah, so she rejects. Sorry, was that a question or a statement? I mean,
that was a question because I assumed it was a future history world building thing, not a legitimate thing that actually exists right now.
the riots you were talking about, the Bell riots or whatever you called it last week, right? Sort of thing.
Right,
is this a legit thing, Jonathan, or just part of
that was my
lore?
speculation? I'm just going to look it up. You keep going, and I'll keep moving.
So needless to say, the board rejects him, and Leah Thompson says, you're forbidden from doing any more of this work, and you're going to stop your funding, and so on and so forth, and whatever. And then Morbius hacks his computer, and you see on the screen, Neo, wake up. Oh, sorry, wrong movie. Yeah, so, he's looking at his computer, and his computer screen goes black, and it says, I can help. And then next thing you see is a bunch of images flashing by with the whole reports and PDFs and, 8x10s with numbers and lines on the back. And basically says, provides proof that he can fix the disease that's hurting his daughter. So he directs Sung over to his 3D printer, which just happened to have printed out like a business card with a big Q on it. And so they set up a meeting to meet each other in the future. Meanwhile, back in Chateau Picard, the policeman has shown up, or the gendarme has showed up, and he's going through the chateau, looking for people, and he just happens to miss Agnes, who's sleeping on the couch. A lot of people sleeping on the couch in this episode, I gotta say, by the way. It seems to be the way, and people don't have beds, they just sleep on couches. Anyway, so in 2024, must be those fancy new couches you can get online. But the Queen, I don't know if the Queen is doing this on purpose or the cloaking device isn't working very well, but she's flashing the ship so that he can see it, and she manages to lure the cop over to the ship, and as he comes in, she starts saying, "Help! I'm over here," and has him. So she lures the cop in, and she captures him basically, and grabs her, uses her tendrils to hold him snug. And then, then we go to a restaurant, and Dr. Sung walks in, and he meets Q sitting there, played by John Lancey, and she says, "It was very sneaky of you to tease me with data so specific to the problem I'm actually trying to solve, and I get a lot of people trying to scam me, and I'm out of here. This is crazy." And Q says to him, "You'll sit in 17 seconds," and he talks about the reason why he's here, and he says, I've taken time for granted. Now she's leaving me." And of course, at which point he says, "You're a crackpot." And he says, "Well, hang on a second before you go. You're a father and you're desperate. That's why you drove all this way to come here," and that kind of thing, right? And then of course, Brent Spiner sits down and he goes, 17 seconds, right on the mark. And so he gives him in talking about what he says, I want something from you, but I'll come back and get it later, which again is a plot in 1,000 different movies and stories and whatever. And he says, "Well, who are you?" He gives him a blue serum, and he says, "Who are you?" Because I am death. I'm the destroyer of worlds. And he says, what I want will come later. So he's obviously going to get something from him in the future. And then, of course, the Laris, Tannen and Picard are talking. She's like, "Well, why doesn't Q, if he's all powerful, why doesn't he just snap his fingers?" And Picard's like, I don't know. Anyway, they're talking about how tomorrow she goes into quarantine, and for the next 3 days. And he's like, oh, great. Well, we just, drug her and knock her out and make sure she gets on that ship. And unfortunately, she has to go to a big gala, invitation thing, tonight. So she can't, they can't just, knock her out and keep her in cold until she's ready to go. So he says, well, we'll attend, and me and my crew, and we'll monitor her, make sure nothing, keep all the bad people away from her. So back on Chateau Picard, the Queen starts to call Agnes, wakes her up from her sleep and starts to lure her towards the, come see what I got for you kind of deal, right? And so Agnes spies an old shotgun, because, you want to pick up a 200-year-old weapon when you want to defend yourself, right? But she picks up this gun on the mantelpiece and, takes it into the ship to basically...
Still loaded, by the way.
Yeah, still loaded, and the powder's still good. Yeah, exactly. In this house, it's, got no more climate control. Anyway, but what do we know about guns? We're in Canada, right?
That's true. It's true.
Exactly.
That was Chekhov's gun.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
All right. So the Queen shows Agnes that she's got this hostage. She's got, her tendrils wrapped around the policeman's neck, and she's, I don't want his body. I could have his body, but what I want is you. You and I should team up, and we'd, put on a show, and we'd be great together. All I want is you. And she starts singing a song by U2. But actually, she doesn't sing a song by U2. But hang on a second. I'm just going to open the computer over here. Yeah, there we go. All right. So yeah, we should, we team up. We'll be forever. And she starts to work on Agnes's loneliness and the fact that you're going to be forever invisible. You'll be alone for the rest of your life. And every timeline I examined, you're alone. Join me and you'll be loved completely and all the time, kind of thing, right? So back over on
I've tried that pickup line. It doesn't work, by the way.
No. All right. So Sung, back on Sung's thing, he tests the serum. He tells his daughter that he's tried it himself. Whether or not he has, we don't know. But he tries it on her, and it solves her problem. He can remove the sunscreen that he's got, this big screen held up by drones over his house, and she can go swimming in the water because the water apparently it's like acid to her or something like that, and the sun burns her skin and things like that. Like she's obviously a golem or something like that.
Anyway. Yeah, I don't know if that's a real disorder, but that sounds really unpleasant.
So anyway, she tries it. She goes swimming, and after a few minutes, she comes out, and I guess the serum wears off, and the magic potion wears off. And she starts to burn, and so he, flips on it, calls the drones back, and they block the sun again. So meanwhile, we see Agnes covered in blood, beaming the crew back, and she says, she beams Raffi and Seven and Rios back to the ship, and says, I think I may have killed their only way home. And of course, the Queen's just hanging there, dead. And then she says she repaired the cop. She put all the parts back except for his spleen. And so they decide they'll drag him out to his car, and she's erased his memory, so they'll put him in his car, and then hopefully he'll forget that they're doing this. And just as Tannen and Picard beam in, and she sees them dragging the dead cop out, and he goes, "Oh, I'm sure he's not dead. There must be some explanation. It's only slightly dead, pining for the fjords." But so back on, Sung and Q are now talking in the same place about the cure, and he says, Q says his wisdom is love nothing, and then you won't be disappointed. And
but of course, what kind of life is that? Is the punchline, right?
Sung says to Q, "What do you want?" And I want you to remove an obstacle because I no longer have the powers that I normally would have in this timeline. Doesn't tell him what it is, but anyway. So the crew is speculating, what's Q playing at? What's he trying to do here? And Renee may back out of the ship if as a therapist he's convinced her that maybe she can just sort of not go on the trip. So Europa they believe is now what causes the future society becomes xenophobic, as Rio says. Do you think that's what it was? Anyway, so Picard points out that she discovers a sentient microorganism on Io and brings it back, and that sets a sort of timeline. That's what they think is the pinnacle thing that she has to do as part of her reason to be here, and that's why Talon is protecting. Although I don't know how Talon's going to protect her on Io.
I guess it's just making sure she gets on the flight and goes, right?
I guess. What if does she like point at the Like sometimes if I drop something on the floor, I have to point at it for my dog because he doesn't quite see it. Anyway, yeah, Q is unpredictable. We don't know what he's going to do. He's a real wild guy, that Q guy. Quite a card. And then, of course, Talon points out the one problem that they have in their flaw in that they haven't been invited to the big gala, and each guest has a special RFID identification. RFID, radio frequency ID. They even say radio frequency ID in the show. They didn't say RFID. But, and she says, I've only got the technology, and it's always the way. She's only got the technology to get one person in, right? So... And Agnes is excited. She says, "Oh, good! I took intro to antique coding. I can get to try my stuff I learned at university." And they talk about how the servers that they have are not connected to the internet. And she says, air gapping. We learned about that too. And so they decide that Agnes can basically get to the computer and inject the IDs to let the rest of the crew into the gala. So, but she has to do it from inside. So she has to find a way to get in. So she goes dressed with a red dress on and. She walks in, and as she's walking into the thing, as usual in this thing, they start, the orchestra is playing "Fly Me to the Moon" and by the song by Frank Sinatra, and or made famous by Frank Sinatra. Who wrote it? It was originally titled "In Other Words," by the way, not "Fly Me to the Moon." Anyway, so she's going through. She's got the chip, or they've hacked the chip into Agnes. It kind of fails, and they ask her for another form of ID. Just happens to have a driver's license card on her, California driver's license, if I'm not mistaken. And so she did. And she said she goes and finds Renee at the party, and she says, "I've got eyes on her." And then she starts acting really suspicious, and holding her hand to her ear as she's talking to herself. And of course, the security or a monitor, she's doing it right underneath a camera, right? So she gets captured and put, in handcuffs inside the surveillance room. And we go back in time just slightly, or we flash back to earlier when Agnes is talking to the Queen, and she's got her shotgun pointed at the Queen, who's still got the policeman there. And basically, she shoots the Queen at the base of her spine, where she says that the Queen's just as vulnerable as the rest of us. And Seven says there are billions of people who will disagree, billions of souls who will disagree with you, but. So the Queen's dying, and she's pleading with Agnes about you need me, and I need you, we need each other, kind of thing. And as she's dying, she manages to get her hand on Agnes's face, and you see the little thingies come out, and she assimilates herself into Agnes's brain there. And you need me, Agnes. And then we're back in the gala, and we see Agnes sitting in a chair, and none other than number 6 puts her arm around Dr. Baltar. Sorry, wrong movie again. The Queen is sitting there in Agnes's imagination, like number 6 was in Battlestar Galactica, and she basically, we fade out, knowing that. I was a little worried about the actress not being able to play the Queen anymore, but clearly she's going to keep playing the Queen, but now she's going to be more animate and following Agnes around. But wasn't Agnes the loose cannon in the last series?
She was the loose cannon in last season too. It's funny how those things just keep coming back around. Yeah.
She's such a pill, that woman.
Anyway, well done.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm here. You had the whole. You're going to send the scientist and not the ranger and the former spy. What's going on here?
Yeah, it was funny when they started doing the breakdown, and then they started showing the scenes of Agnes going in there. I was like, oh my God, they're doing Ocean's 11, they're doing Ocean's 6, they're doing Picard 6. It was it was very definitely felt like one of those heist movie kind of vibes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. This was actually, we talked about how I sort of felt like it was a little bit of a slow burn the last couple episodes. This one definitely had a lot more happening and a lot more traction, although more questions than answers. Once again, why? Like, what do the Sungs have to do with this? Why are they here now? And then, what exactly is it that happens on Io? And, obviously what's going to happen now with Agnes being assimilated, because theoretically, I guess we're supposed to assume that the Queen is dead, right? Like, she shot her in the neck. It seems like she's physically deceased, but obviously as she was dying, she infected Agnes, and therefore her consciousness.
Well, they had mind melted before. Melted before, because remember, Agnes sort of was smart enough to realize to sort of block the Queen from having full control over her, right? But I think she's probably capitulated now. Mm-hmm. The other thing too about the Soongs is in the recap, which we didn't talk about at the very beginning. They flash back to that scene again where flying over the new San Francisco, and you see the statue of Soong. And you hear Brent Spiner's voice saying, a good human is whatever, dead human. I can't remember what the expression was, but you hear that voice again, clearly saying that. So obviously the Soongs play an important role in this timeline's future, right? Mm-hmm. So, they play an important role in the next generation as well, because we wouldn't have Data without Soong, right? So
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think that there's definitely a connection between what Soong has to do now and his potential future as well. It's affected by his actions in the next couple of episodes, right?
Yeah, and we knew that obviously Soongs must have played a role somewhere in there, because even in the dark future they had synthetic people, right? So
yes.
We knew that had come to pass, but it's very strange. Again, it was a little far-fetched. I did find myself, again, I get it. I get why you're doing what you're doing. I get why you're bringing Brent Spiner back, because he's a fan favorite and he's a good actor and everything, but it felt a little forced to be like, hey, Brent Spiner's going to play his fifth different character. Like, how many different characters has he played across? He played himself. He played Data. He played Lore. He's played B4. He's played the actual the scientist Soong.
Noonien Soong.
Yeah, and then now he played his Soong's son last season. Now he's playing his ancestor. It's just basically anybody with the name Soong will just bring in Brent. Brent will play it, because apparently that genetic line is so strong, as is that hairline, that we can just have him play any roles throughout the history of this. And coincidentally, the synthetic daughter that his progeny invents 400 years in the future looks exactly like the daughter that he had in the 21st century. Anyways, it's a little far-fetched. Isn't the character that she plays in the future Soji? What's her name again? Well, yeah, there's Soji and
but aren't they made by Soong?
They are. No, they're made by Soong's. Oh, I can't even remember from last season now. I'm drawing a blank. They were invented by Soong's ancestor, isn't it?
But it's a Soong. It's in the Soong line, right?
It is.
Yeah. So
but they weren't created by Data.
You were saying, sorry?
But they weren't created by Data.
No, I don't mean no. They're from the.
I think they were created Soong. By Soong's son, who is the character we meet last year, who creates the golem that Picard now inhabits.
Right, and so and why he couldn't fix his voice is another question. But you were asking why she happens to look like the Baroness character, or Baroness actress, right? Just conveniently, well, that might be why. Maybe there's something about this particular, child that Corey, that they have her, holographic
visual representation,
her, rendering or whatever. Yeah,
maybe they'll bring it back around. So between that and then the quote unquote coincidence, which obviously remains to be explained, but the coincidence of the character happening to be exactly like the character who played, the actress who played Laris is now playing Talon. How did those two things come about? And it gets called out obviously pretty quickly by Raffi as hey, what the F? And Picard sort of sloughs it off. He's like, don't worry about it. And clearly there's more there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just, I'm curious to see how they reconcile that. I'm not sure anything that they bring forward is going to be truly satisfying. It just feels like an excuse to bring the same actor to play this different part.
Yeah.
I don't know. I found that a little, again, both of those situations to be a little far-fetched. But not enough to remove from the episode. And again, I like Brent Spiner a lot. It's one of my favorite actors in sci-fi for the last 30 years. Plus, I really like DC Briones last season. I thought she was great. It just feels a little convoluted, and it wouldn't have hurt to be somebody else.
Well, they even brought back Elrond, which I didn't talk about, just because when one of the young Spanish people are getting off the bus, she thinks it's Elrond, right? It actually was the actor in the shot.
Yeah.
But, but she realizes she's mistaken another young lad who looks like him for him, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so they it's like they have their bubble of actors, and they want to make sure they use them all, right?
Yep. Yeah, and again, I get it. It's fine. It's just you can't expect us to just all bite on that immediately and be like, sure, that makes sense.
Yeah,
completely.
So you were gonna dissect the good talk part that Raffi has with.
Yeah, just it's that, right? It's the convenience of like, does this make sense? No. And they sort of, it almost felt like a little bit of a gloss, right? Where she's like, this doesn't make any sense. Obviously, she's the avatar for us, right? She's the avatar for us going, but wait, what? But, it clearly, it stands. So, I don't know. Again, we've got 5 more episodes to unpack all this. We're halfway through the series now. I did like that this one seemed to move things a little bit faster. I did find, and I get it. I get what they were going for, but like the whole, the tyranny of ice stuff, again, I'm a Caucasian man living in Canada, so it doesn't resonate as much as I'm sure it does for a different audience. But I don't know. It felt a little bit much for me. I don't know. It felt like social commentary for social commentary's sake. So far, maybe they'll tie it all together in a way that I haven't seen yet, but it felt a little tacked on. I don't know. If they had removed the whole Rios subplot, would we be any further behind where we are now? No, we would have actually been able to eliminate probably 40 minutes of content that wouldn't have impacted things.
But the thing is, the Rios subplot has to be there because Pedro obviously has to have a role.
Do you think? I really feel like that was it for Pedro. I felt like that was like, good job, Pedro. High five. Let's move on.
Yeah, but they don't normally give people, more than 5 lines if they're just going to be, cannon or torpedo fodder, right? And Teresa has to come back, and the son has to come back because he still has to go back and get his communicator, right?
I guess.
You can't leave it there, right? So
yeah, I don't know. I am of the mind, having sort of studied storytelling and screenplay writing for a long time, that you don't just do things. You don't not close plot holes unless you're sloppy, and Star Trek writers aren't sloppy.
I see. So you think closing off Pedro is closing off Pedro?
I think closing off Pedro is closing off Pedro, because they do have a moment where it's like, good job, man. And it really, that if you look at that from the beginning of his introduction, where he's being abused by that cop and he's being treated badly and he's being forcibly deported, and then it comes back to he gets his moment of vindication when he helps Rios by knocking out that same cop, and then they high five and they say goodbye to each other. They speak Spanish and they say goodbye to each other. To me, that completes his arc. I don't think there's a need for him to continue. I agree with you with Teresa. That feels very unsatisfyingly ended, but at the same time, I'm not sure where else to go with that. My only thought was, if now we have an infected Agnes, does it come back around, hey, we need a doctor in a few episodes to try and like fix the possessed Agnes? Maybe they go to Teresa to try and to reconcile that. But I'm kind of grasping at straws at this point. There's still a bunch of episodes to go.
Mr. Lopez?
I'm a little unclear what's going to happen here. I had mentioned the nasty and the pasty scenario that could crop up, because it felt a little weird that the doctor was so prominent, and also they seem to be, more chemistry there than you would expect for like a plot point character. The other thing I'm a little unclear on is they were trying not to change things and letting loose a whole bus of people who, in the moment you could be like, oh, this is terrible, what happened? I'm like, yeah, but maybe that's what's supposed to happen. Maybe you just have now caused Space Hitler to occur, and maybe this is how the Confederation
the butterfly
occurs.
Wings and all that, exactly. Yeah.
They went to round it out with Simpsons. They went the Simpsons Treehouse episode where he stops, avoiding things, and he just starts stepping on everything and punching and clubbing everything to try to go back in time, sort of thing. So I don't know It's so hard with these that are so serialized. It's like, oh, okay, here we are in episode 9, and then finally it makes sense, right? And if you were binge watching it, it would feel a little bit more sensible and straightforward. And it's partially because we're watching week to week to week that it's less clear what's going to happen. It is what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. Well, to be continued. I thought it was a good episode. I was in. I thought they did a better job of moving things forward, but then they also opened up a whole new couple of cans of worms that got things even more muddled. So I have faith that they know what they're doing, and I can't wait to see what they come up with next.
So we talk about
the Moon Knight.
Moon Knight.
Did you both watch Moon Knight?
I watched Moon Knight.
I did.
All right. Jaime, I want to hear what you thought, your first impressions of Moon Knight.
I liked that it was, again, very different from the other things that we've seen.
Agreed.
You got a character who, like, you start out in the middle of his, weirdness, right? It's like, why does this dude chain himself to a bed? Why does he have a whole bunch of sand near his bed? So they kind of establish early on that, oh, okay, he needs to know that he is not sleepwalking because he clearly believes he's sleepwalking and having weird things happening. So I like that. I like the sort of Venom-esque voice in his head occurring that's confusing the heck out of him. The way that they show the transitions from I'm living my normal life to I'm flipping out, and then I've woken up from having blacked out and having to readjust to things, and even losing time, like considerable amounts of time, is pretty interesting too. Like the missed date where he's like, no, today's Friday, right? He's like, no, it's Sunday.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a cool, different thing.
Yeah, I liked, I think, most of all of this, that this is the first thing since The Mandalorian that is wholly new. We jumped back in with familiar characters on all the Marvel series so far. We've jumped in with familiar characters with Book of Boba Fett. Mandalorian was the first thing where we were like, where are we? We had to sort of figure out what was happening. We knew the universe. So it's the same thing with this. We know the MCU, but we didn't really know the character. We didn't know the setting, and we kind of had to piece it together. And I thought it was really, the editing on this is amazing. Whoever is the editor for this, I should have looked up their name. I'll look it up for next week. But the editor was fantastic. The way that they do the time jumps, the way that Steven sort of has these episodes where he's like, but wait, I was just, what's happening? And then he finds a gun in his hand, or he finds himself covered in blood, or he finds himself in a different location. The time jumps, the way that they did that throughout the whole episode, I thought was fantastic. But I really liked that it was something wholly original. Like, we're coming at this with no previous connection to this character. We're coming at this with no familiar setting. It's not like at one point, Rhodey walks by and we're like, oh, but War Machine's here, so it's all good. Like, it was really something fresh and original. And Oscar Isaacs, I think, I've always thought he's a really good performer, and I thought he really did a good job of sort of selling the absolute confusion and disorientation that Steven's going through in this episode. I thought that was really, really well done. And then mixing into that just some of these atypical Marvel things. This was one of the darker things we've seen, as far as like, there's some moments in there that are creepy and dark and shadowy, and that's not something we necessarily relate to the Marvel stuff, although I think we're getting a little more so as we creep into the Doctor Strange multiverse of madness of it all. And there's been some small tastes, but I really think this is something that I enjoyed more so than I think some of the other stuff, because it's just so different. Tim? Yeah,
no, I thought it was really good. I enjoyed the sort of twisty sort of nature of it. I mean, to me, it seems like he's got like this, it's almost like he has a split personality. He can't remember what the other person incorporates his body does. Like, in what do you call it, the disorders where they don't have a personality disorders, they don't often know what the others are doing when they're
it's disassociative, I think is what they call it.
Disassociated, yeah, exactly. That's the word I was looking for. But because I saw that described today earlier when I was looking at this thing, I enjoyed it. It was kind of interesting. I love the way and it was really, like you said, a really action filled. The chase on the windy roads in the mountains, and sort of the interactions with Ethan Hawke and that kind of stuff, right? So, and that the woman he works for, holy cow, she got to go. Lucy Thackeray. Yeah, she's just and the just the way he sort of fish out of water, and it's funny that this episode's called "The Goldfish Problem," and it's kind of like it's almost like he's literally taken it out of water. And then the sort of twisty part is that earlier in the episode the goldfish clearly only has a stump of a fin in the beginning of the story, and then turning at the end, and then he loses 3 or 4 days regularly, it seems, right? So because he misses a date with this woman, and and we're right along with him, right? So like we miss it too. So yeah, good. I mean, completely. I wasn't sure what I was going to get. I thought I was going to get another, not having ever read the comic or whatever. I thought we were just going to get another. Was that one with the Captain America dude? Not the Captain America.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier. The
Winter. Yeah, I thought we were just going to get another one of those. Kind of like let's punch everybody in the head, kind of comic book story. But this is quite different. Sort of in the same sort of way that WandaVision was kind of refreshing because it had a different sort of take on things, right? So,
well, and we talk about the strengths of Marvel storytelling over the past decade has been this diversification. It's that they're not just telling comic book origin stories over and over again. It's that they're telling a comedy and a horror and a high intensity drama and a Shakespearean story, and they're really pushing their characters into different genres beyond just what you sort of expect from a comic book story. And I think that's why WandaVision worked well, and I think that's why Falcon and the Winter Soldier didn't as much, although I thought it was good. I feel like it was a little bit more sort of tried and true action comic booky kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, it's kind of like just another, Avengers kind of thing.
Yeah, right? Whereas this really feels like,
this is kind of like Loki was twisty and just off it's on par with Loki in terms of weirdness. By the way, just a quick question. So I was in a meeting today, and at the beginning of the meeting, they put up a poll, and they said, what do you like better, Marvel or DC? Now, I think that's a tricky question because, clearly, if you're talking about in the last, 10, 15 years, Marvel has been, eating DC's lunch when it comes to movies, right? But you and I both know that, the DC universe goes back to like amazing characters like Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman, and Spider-Man, right?
Well, Spider-Man's Marvel.
Spider-Man? Oh, sorry, yeah, but you know what I mean? Like Batman and Superman have clearly been like the favorites for a long, long, long time, and it's kind of like, as somebody who's older. When I'm asked whether I like DC or Marvel, if you asked me 10 years ago or more, I might have said DC because of the whole Batman and Superman thing, right? But I mean, the clearly, like in modern pop culture movies and TV shows now, Marvel is definitely a notch above, right? In terms of execution.
Yeah, it's tricky, and it actually, I think it leads well into our next little bit that we were going to talk about, sort of the Batman, which you and I and my son went to see last weekend. Yeah.
Some of the best superhero movies we've seen in the last 10 years have had the Batman in it.
Well, and that's it. So that's the tricky part: is what are they doing right with Batman that they're doing wrong with others? You can make a case that they haven't made a great Superman movie since 1980. The last great Superman movie was Superman 2, and there's been 5 since then. Whereas Batman seems to never fail. And as much as
George Clooney and
what, it still made money. Like, obviously, it's terrible. It's campy garbage. I mean, both of those the second pair of movies were not great, but they did well at the box office and they accomplished what they were supposed to. And to be honest, like, there was an unrefined audience for comic book fare at that point. They would not have been ready for what we saw last weekend. They in 1998 or whatever that came out, they would not have been ready for the Batman, the Matt Reeves Dark Knight kind of interpretation. Mm-hmm. We had to get there. But that being said, Marvel obviously has stumbled onto a formula that's worked really well, and that's that connectivity between its universes. And one of the reasons why the Nolan interpretation of Batman worked well, and one of the reasons why the Batman has worked so well, is it's disconnected from that larger storytelling. And it made me think as we were watching that this is probably the best direction for DC to go going forward, is stop trying to universe build and focus on telling great stories. And if there's an opportunity to overlap characters, cool, but stop forcing it. Stop doing what the Joneses are doing down the street. Focus on telling great stories with the great characters you have. And if it requires a story that crosses characters over, cool, but just focus on, like, you have, as you say, 90 years of amazing stories on which you can leverage. That's what something else that Marvel's done, is taken its best stories and really sort of told them differently across the screen. The Infinity Saga, et al. I think the best thing that DC can do to get back in the competitive game is just to tell good stories. And the Batman is a great example of that. I didn't love everything about it. I'll be honest, I think other than Harry Potter, I don't think I've ever seen a Robert Pattinson movie in my life. I know he has people who love him, and I know he has people who don't love him. I thought he played a great Batman and an okay Bruce Wayne. He was a little gothy, a little emo-y for me as a Bruce Wayne. Now, I get that they're trying to do...
Wait, Emo's not that comedian guy you're talking about?
No, not a different kind of emo. No, okay. No, he was just the whole...
Oh, emotional, you mean?
Yes.
Is that what you mean by emo? Yes. Oh, okay, gotcha.
The whole thing with his, his hair falling in his face constantly.
Yeah,
and
like, comb your hair.
He looked a little 1980s goth kitty for my tastes. But
he only wore a tuxedo once in this movie.
Well,
right?
But again, and I get what they're going for. This was supposed to be Batman Year 2, right? So he's not supposed to be fresh at it, but he's still supposed to be relatively new. So he makes mistakes. He's not as polished, and he hasn't found the need yet to be Bruce Wayne, billionaire distraction, as the opposite face to who he really is, which is the Batman. So I get what they're going for there, but the strength of this movie is that it's built around a really good villain and a really good, well-told mystery of how it all pieces together. And it's a slow burn in the same way that if you took him out of that Bat uniform, it would just be a good crime noir story. And that's what Batman's always been its strongest. And that's perfect. And it was genius of them to go at it that way. And frankly, long overdue for them to go at it that way. The only time I've ever seen them do that well over the last number of years outside of comic books is, frankly, Batman the Animated Series did a great job of having him be the detective. I just feel like they need to start leaning into the strengths of the characters they have. They need to start leveraging some of the amazing stories that have already been told and telling them a little bit differently, like this. And stop trying to just copy what, like Marvel started creating the Avengers. So they were like, cool, we'll create the Justice League. We'll slowly unfurl all these characters and we'll have them all come together. Well, you know what? Marvel captured lightning in a bottle. It's not something you just whip off. It doesn't work like that, So I hope that they don't take this as a sign that they need to do things like, oh, well, now we'll have Robert Pattinson be the leader of the new, we'll rebuild from here. It sounds like this movie is meant to sort of exist outside of the DCEU, and they've created this very rich world that they can build just a Batman universe around. Cool. Now, if you want to expand this, tell me another Batman story, or tell me a Catwoman story set in this same universe, or tell me a Nightwing story set in this universe. You don't have to be like, and now we got to team them up with Superman and Wonder Woman right away. Like, just focus on telling me good stories. And, again, good start. A+ effort. Go, keep going. Don't drop the ball like you have the last 20 years.
Of course, Jaime hasn't seen it, so what do you think about it, honey?
I hope I didn't spoil anything. I thought I tried to do pretty spoiler-free.
No, I feel like I'm still unspoiled, and it seems like it's been doing pretty well, so glad to see that.
It's made more money now than any of the DCEU movies. I read that today on, I believe, Entertainment Weekly, that it is now the highest grossing DC movie from the last 20 years, and it's beaten out all of those ones that were supposed to be interconnected and rebooting and blah, 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 blah. So again, tell a good story and people will come, and word of mouth will take off, and social will go, and Rotten Tomatoes will expand, and focus on telling good stories. Stop trying to world build. Just tell good stories.
Yeah. That's good. Cool.
And that being said, Jaime, when you get the chance, go for it.
Yeah, it'll be good.
It's definitely worthwhile. I mean, we saw it in IMAX, and it was on a slow night. It wasn't. I mean, there's probably like 30 people.
Yeah, I would say there was like less than 10% capacity would be my guess.
Yeah, and we were able to sort of get relatively distant seats from other people, right? So,
although one of us might have been having some health problems that we found out later about.
Yeah. Anyway, that won't get in the show. Anyway, for obvious reasons. So let's move on to the watch list. So I guess I'll go first. I was sort of hinting at this earlier that the Ready Room from last week's episode for The Watcher had Leah Thompson in the hot seat with the ever effervescent Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton?
Will Wheaton, yes. And so definitely worth a watch. We've got a link here in the show notes, talking about, obviously her experience working with, and there's a bunch of clips floating around too on the Ready Room and on StarTrek.com of the actors talking about their experience working with her, and showing some of the fun and how she was able to, let the actress who played Raffi, really get into the whole loss of Elrond and not Elrond, Elnor, the loss of Elnor, and just sort of the fun that they had, working with her, and sort of even still sort of thinking, well, this is Leah frickin' Thompson from Howard the Duck, But
that's my favorite new bit. I love it. I love it so much.
Anyway, so definitely worth watching. Talking to her about, he does talk to her about some of her experiences from other sci-fi things, for which she's been in a few other sci-fi movies. I can't remember what they are off the top of my head.
Something about the future.
They don't. They have no
DeLorean, or I don't know.
Yeah, they're pretty quacky, but anyway, the what?
Said something about a DeLorean.
Oh, DeLorean. Oh, yeah. My nephew's car. Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Anyway, he doesn't listen to the show. Don't worry about it. So definitely worth watching. I mean, it was an interesting interview talking with her.
And she did episodes 2 and... Oh, no, she did episode 3 and 4. Jonathan Frakes did this week's episode.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're just doing 2 apiece, so Frakes might be doing next week's as well, but yeah.
Maybe. Was he? I guess he must have been in Toronto for that. No,
they're doing it in California.
Right? Yeah. Cool. All right, and the next link I got from friend of the show, number one fan, drumroll please, Xavier Kuline, a piece by Ryan Reynolds called "Cybersecurity and Skincare," and he goes in, he's talking. I guess he owns a football team now, or soccer team.
Yeah, co-owns.
Yeah, football. Let's call them football team. Let's call them what they are. And talking about our favorite app, the number one app for password management on more than just code, 1Password. Talking about how 1Password helps you with your family and with your security and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of it, he starts talking about skincare. So yeah, definitely worth checking this one out. It's pretty funny. It's been making rounds around amongst IT people as well. Like I've seen it on other places, but. Xavier gets a shout out for putting it up here first, and then over to Jaime for. Didn't we talk about Turning Red before?
Well, I had not seen Turning Red or Spider-Man: No Way Home.
I see. Oh, so these are like I'm supposed to edit these into like a couple of weeks ago show, or I'm just kidding.
No, it's more like another +1 for Turning Red.
The American perspective on Turning Red. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so
before you get into that, my niece, Justin, the one who owns the DeLorean, and Alicia both went to a school in Scarborough, which was the setting for the school in Turning Red.
There you go.
Did you know that? Cool. Off you go,
So I don't understand the people out there who didn't find Turning Red something that they could identify with or get into, because I say this is somebody who is, not a woman, not Chinese, not Canadian, and I found it very understandable and relatable. So I think it's great.
Oh yeah, but you like Paw Patrol.
To be clear, with Paw Patrol, I said, whoa, this is better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be absolute rubbish. And it's not great, Paw Patrol that is, but it feels like, man, people actually tried on this project. It wasn't going to win Academy Awards, with the Paw Patrol material, but like, man, they got their closest to trying to do it though. It's Rocky 1, right? Where Rocky loses. He loses at the end of the movie. Spoilers, but he loses at the end of the movie. But it was about like how he showed how you could go toe to toe. That's the Paw Patrol crew. But coming back to Turning Red, I thought it was pretty relatable. It is at a very high level. It is essentially the same story as Encanto, of like family is the true villain kind of thing. There's no straight up villain in this movie. It's family that's the antagonist at the very least. Put it that way. And other than a couple of things where they said, I know we've said this on the show. It was like she puts on a beanie to cover her hair, and it was like, oh, why are you wearing le toque or whatever it is y'all called over there? That's right. It's a beanie. That's what they call it over there. And the Sky Dome, I was like, is that like a made up thing, or is that like the previous name where the Blue Jays played? Apparently, it was the old name that they would have used back then for where the Blue Jays play. So
it was originally called the Sky Dome, yes.
Yeah, but like, I don't know, right? Because I'm not from Toronto and I'm not Canadian, so
before you go too far into that one, so originally they had a sort of contest to see what people would call them, and one of our big sports owners was a guy named Conn Smythe, so they thought they should call it the Condome.
Well, it was actually a contest. That's the best part of the original naming of that building. It was in 1989 when the Blue Jays moved there. They opened it up and made it into a contest, like name the dome. And I cannot imagine how many filthy things got put into that contest. So just too many funny things. But Sky Dome is what won, and the person who won the contest, I think there was multiple people that put that in, and then they did a draw basically of those people. The one person who ended up winning it got like lifetime seats at the thing, and then like 15 years later or 20 years later, they decided to change the name after the team was bought by Rogers Communications, which is the biggest telecom company in the country, I think, next maybe tied with Bell, I don't know, and theoretically, it's not named after Rogers, the corporation. It's named after Ted Rogers, who is the owner of it. There's a statue of him outside. Not a statue of Roberto Alomar. Not a statue of Joe Carter. Not a statue of any of the people who are like in the Hall of Fame that have played for the Blue Jays, but one of Ted Rogers. But yeah, it was. There are still people who, on principle, will not call it the Sky Dome. There's a lot of us that still call it the Sky Dome because we're like, stupid corporate sellout nonsense.
It's down the street from the Air Canada Centre, right?
That's right. The Air Canada Centre, now also known as Scotiabank Arena, which I refuse to play that game too. So,
but did the guy lose his lifetime seat?
I don't think so. But I'd be miffed if I was like, my legacy. I'm gonna tell my family for years. I'm gonna dine out on the fact that I named this place. Nope.
Wow.
Anyways, sorry to interrupt there. I mean, I just that
no, that's good insight to like I said, like there were a handful of things because not Canadian, but like nothing that will actually matter in any important way to the enjoyment of the story, right? It was more of the understanding what was going on in Canada around that time bits, but the basics are there. They've certainly dealt with. It's kind of weird to call Canada like a exotic foreign land. But if you've dealt with like exotic foreign lands in other Disney films, you'll enjoy Turning Red. So I liked it. And cool. My second one here is I'm late to the game for Spider-Man No Way Home. Finally got
wait before you move on,
Sure.
The name of the school is the Ord Street Public School. ORDE. There you go.
Now we know.
And the kids are all the kids who went there all thought it was haunted because it was so old. There you go. Back to you, Jaime.
Cool. So for me, I was very late to the game with Spider-Man No Way Home, but saw it this past weekend on digital.
Was that the movie that was on last year?
Yeah, and I stayed relatively unspoiled, I think. It's surprisingly not for everything, but I was like, oh, okay. I still went into this without really knowing what was going to happen. I'm not going to spoil it here. I recommend you all go see it if you haven't, and if you haven't seen it, go watch that first, and then watch my actual pick here, which is this YouTube short, which kind of goes in line with my beliefs. Without spoiling anything, I think Peter's main decision that causes a lot of the drama was the wrong decision. It's in line with his character. I'm not disagreeing with that, but like, I was yelling at the screen, what are you doing? And this short does a great job of like, yeah, exactly. That's what was going to happen when you made that choice.
Yeah. But did you enjoy it? Were you like, did it resonate?
It did. I do think it's going to be somewhat challenging one for somewhat more casual fans of stuff. Like I'm kind of curious to see when like my mother sees it, for example. I'm going to ask her what she thought, because there's so many references and a lot of like, whoa, I can't believe they brought so and so kind of thing. I can't believe how deep this cut goes, and I wonder if she'll pick up on that, and will she have the same level of enjoyment from the love letter to the fans I think you all had described it as back many moons ago.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is a movie that you can probably watch on its own, but definitely serves better if you have that history with it, right?
Yeah, I wonder if it's like the lower decks of Marvel sort of thing, where it's got so much sort of packed in there, and I kind of wonder if I even caught everything. I probably should go find a website that covers that. I wonder if I even caught every reference.
Yeah, there was a lot. That's my only sort of criticism of that movie is it's a lot. There's a lot packed in there.
Indeed.
All right, I got a couple things. One, I just started, so I started watching Peacemaker, the John Cena spin-off from the Suicide Squad. It's produced by James Gunn. It definitely has carries over the sort of sense of humor, the sort of quirky, weird side of the DCEU, but like takes it up like 8 notches from there. Like it's bizarre. It's really weird. It's so fun and funny, but just like really weird. It's really, really weird. The show starts like the opening credits are like a dance number with like people in costume dancing, and like it's super weird. The whole thing with his sidekick is an eagle that is computer generated and acts really weirdly, and that like at one point gives him a hug. Like it's so very weird, but I gotta admit, I laughed my ass off. I loved it. I am totally cannot wait to watch more of it. So yeah, I'll report back when I finally power through the whole thing, but I sat down just sort of not sure what to expect based on the character, because the character in the movie, he's almost I don't want to spoil anything for Suicide Squad for people who haven't seen it, but he's almost sort of this straight guy. Like he's not super funny. He's not he's not the best part of that movie, and I wasn't sure what they saw in that would lead to this, but Cena is hilarious. He's so deadpan and he's so earnest in who he is as a character, and he's great. He's so good. It's so fun. I highly recommend both checking out Suicide Squad and then checking out this. Although I will say, if you don't want to or don't feel like you need to watch Suicide Squad, there's like a 3-minute, maybe 4-minute recap right at the beginning of episode 1 that basically gives you everything you need to know about who he is and how he ended up where he ended up and where you pick him up from. So it's good. I will say just a big warning. in the same way that Suicide Squad was like pretty gross and over the top as far as the level of like violence and profanity and all that kind of stuff, this picks it up and takes it up 6 notches. So you like, there's sex and sexuality, there's extreme violence, there's language, there this is 100% adult show, but in a very good way. It's very The Boys. And as a matter of fact, it's even more so than The Boys because it's deliberately hyper violent, hypersexual, hyper ridiculous, hyper reality. But like I say, I've really dug what I've seen so far, and I'm in.
Yeah, maybe the non-spoilery best quote I had to look this up. I could think of from the Suicide Squad that describes his character from the movie. Very curious to see how that translates into the TV show. Is I cherish, so he's called the Peacemaker.
The Peacemaker, yeah.
Right? I cherish peace with all of my heart. I don't care how many men, women, and children I killed to get it.
Yeah.
Which is the very core of the character.
It's just he's so deeply flawed, and they really explore that too, because they make a reference in the Suicide Squad to the fact that like his dad taught him, every possible way to kill a person, and every conceivable way to use a weapon and everything else. And not too spoilery, but we do get to meet his dad in the first episode, and you're like, oh, okay, this completely makes sense why he's crazy. Like it's so good. It's so very good. So yeah, I'm in on that one. I'm definitely going to watch more. The other thing I wanted to bring up was Morbius. And I just wanted to bring this up because we had these conversation over the last couple episodes, and I couldn't resist taking a small victory lap, because I was talking about how I just hate the fact that there's still this fracture in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where Sony's kind of got its license to do whatever it wants with a bunch of Spider-Man related characters. And even though Spider-Man has now been appropriated into the MCU, we're still getting the Venoms and these sort of spin-off things. This is the latest one set in the Sony Spider-Verse. It's coming out tomorrow for us. It'll be out for a few days by the time you hear this. It is getting destroyed in its reviews. It's currently the lowest rated Marvel movie of the 21st century. It's rating 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is I sent a link to the in our Slack chat the other day from Cinema Blend, where the headline is, "I didn't know it was possible to make comic book movies this bad anymore." And the writer, who I'm gonna look it up because this dude I really enjoyed his writing, Eric Eisenberg for Cinema Blend, just eviscerates this movie for a good 5-minute read. I recommend that one as well. But he nails it. He's like, who wanted this? It's an origin story of a character that nobody knows, that nobody cares, told badly, in a pocket of the MCU that no one knows, understands, or cares about. And, I don't understand why they made this in the first place. And I'm glad that it's a disaster. I hope that it makes 5 cents at the box office and is just another stepping stone towards Sony stopping doing this.
A little splash in the face. Correction of a sorts, similar to the way that Disney pulled in the reins on the Star Wars films after the sequels.
Yep, 100% that. And the same way that they had to hit the reset button on the Batman movies after those 2 Joel Schumacher nightmares, I hope that this is a swift smack across the nose just for them to understand, no Sony, bad Sony, that they need to think a little harder before they throw away, I'm guessing, probably at least $150 million to make a movie like this. So I feel very vindicated by the outcomes of this, and I'm hopeful that this could lead to some changes, because I also think that, in spite of obviously the recaps we've given on Sony's financial affairs, no studio can afford to lose the kind of money that they stand to potentially lose on something like this. It's not like they have their own streaming service too, where they can be like, well, it didn't work here, we'll put it on a streaming service, people will subscribe so they can watch it. Like, they're going to do what? They're going to sell the rights to show this 20% Rotten Tomatoes movie on Netflix. Like, cool.
Your Sony PlayStation Plus Extreme Limited Unlimited, subscription Game Pass be $1 more.
That's it. That's exactly
for no clear reason to make up for this, to make up for the revenue hole.
For anybody wondering why their PS5 costs so damn much, it's because you just paid Jared Leto $15 million to be in a B movie.
Wow.
Yeah, put that on a poster.
Yeah, he's laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, sure. What does he care? Like, Jared Leto takes big swings. Sometimes they hit and he hits it out of the park, and sometimes you have Morbius.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I guess that's it for another week. So, hey, Jonathan, people want to get in touch with you. Where do they find you?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram as @GPK News.
All right. And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you.
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithTheHair.
And as usual, my name is Tim Mitra, TIMMITRA. On the Torture Machine is where you'll find me. Until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spockcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spockcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spockcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.